Stories number 1. My dad's wife expected me to babysit. I went to work instead, and now the whole family is mad at me. I grew up in Ohio, mostly raised by my mom, Sharon. My parents split when I was 7, and my dad, Mark, remarried a few years later to a woman named Jennifer. She's younger than my dad, not by a crazy amount, but enough that people raised eyebrows. They've been together for about 15 years now, and they have 2 kids together, my half-siblings, Logan and Emma. For context, I'm 23 now, I live on my own, but not far from my dad's place. I work full-time at a warehouse, and it's not a cushy job. If I miss shifts, I don't get paid. If I rack up too many no-shows, I could get fired. That's just the reality. I've been pretty clear with my dad and Jennifer that while I love my younger siblings, I'm not their built-in babysitter. I'll help when I can, but I have a job, bills, and a life of my own. The problem is, Jennifer doesn't seem to get that. She's a stay-at-home mom mostly, but when she does have appointments or errands, she'll sometimes call me last minute to come watch the kids. When I was in college and had a lighter schedule, I'd say yes more often, but now that I'm working 40-plus hours a week, I can't just drop everything. She acts like I'm selfish for not prioritizing family. This all blew up last week. I had an early morning shift scheduled on Friday, 6 a.m. start, meaning I needed to be at the warehouse by 5:45 at the latest. The night before, around 9:30 p.m., I got a text from Jennifer. "Hey, I need you to come by tomorrow morning and watch Logan and Emma. I have an appointment and Mark's working overtime. Thanks in advance." Notice the wording, not "could you" or "are you available?" Just a flat "I need you to." I texted back, "Sorry, I have work at 6. Can't." She didn't respond right away, so I figured she'd find another solution, but at 5:20 a.m., literally as I was grabbing my keys to head out, she called me. I didn't answer because I was already running a little late. By the time I parked at work, I had 5 missed calls and 2 voicemails. The first voicemail was her snapping, "Where are you? You said you'd do this. I told you it was important." Which was a lie. I'd clearly said I couldn't. The second voicemail was more upset, saying if I didn't come, she'd have to cancel her appointment. So I clocked in and started my shift. I was unloading pallets when my dad called. I answered because he usually only calls if something serious is happening. He was pissed. He said Jennifer had to cancel her appointment, something she'd apparently been waiting weeks for, and that Logan and Emma were crying because they thought I was coming over. He accused me of being unreliable and letting the family down. I reminded him that I told Jennifer I couldn't babysit because I had work. He shot back, "Work isn't everything. You could have asked for a couple hours off. Family comes first." That made my blood boil. Because where was this energy when I was younger and needed help with tuition? Or when I was juggling 2 jobs to keep my car from being repossessed? Suddenly my 16-an-hour warehouse job is something I should treat as expendable because Jennifer wanted to get her hair done. Yes, I found out later the appointment was literally a salon visit. By the time I got home that evening, I had texts from Jennifer saying I was selfish, lazy, and didn't care about my brother and sister. Even my grandmother, my dad's mom, Linda, called me and said, "Honey, sometimes we just have to make sacrifices for the little ones." I snapped at her, which I regret, but I was just so frustrated. I said, "I'm not the parent here, Mark and Jennifer are. If they need childcare, that's on them, not me." Now I'm getting the cold shoulder from most of that side of the family. The only one who quietly said he understood was my Uncle Brian, who told me he went through something similar when he was younger, basically being leaned on as free childcare until he drew a line. He told me, "They'll guilt you, but stand your ground. If you cave once, it'll never stop." And he's right, because here's the thing. I do love Logan and Emma. They're sweet kids. Logan's 9, Emma's 6, and they're always excited when I come by. I'll take them to the park, play video games with Logan, help Emma with coloring books, but that's because I want to, not because I'm ordered to at the last minute. I shouldn't have to sacrifice my job to cover for their mom not planning ahead. And I feel like Jennifer's making this about loyalty when it's really about boundaries. She wants me to be a live-in babysitter without acknowledging that I have my own responsibilities. My dad's siding with her, which sucks. But I also get that he's in a tough spot. Still, it hurts hearing him call me unreliable when I've busted my ass to be independent. I guess I'm just venting at this point, but yeah, that's where things stand. Jennifer's mad, Dad's mad, Grandma's disappointed, and I'm sitting here wondering how the hell I became the villain for. Going to work. Update. So things got messier after my first post. I honestly thought maybe everyone would cool down once some time passed, but instead it's kind of snowballed into this bigger family fight than I expected. The weekend after the babysitting incident, I got invited to my Grandma Linda's house for Sunday dinner. Normally, those dinners are big family events. Lots of casseroles, sweet tea, kids running around, uncles watching football in the living room. I debated skipping because I knew Jennifer and my dad would be there, but I figured maybe it was better to show up and just face it. As soon as I walked in, I could feel the tension. Jennifer gave me this fake smile and then avoided eye contact the rest of the night. My dad was cold, short answers, no real conversation. The only one who seemed normal was my Uncle Brian, and he actually patted me on the back when I came in, which I appreciated more than I can explain. We were halfway through dinner when it all came up. Emma asked me, "Why didn't you come play with us last Friday?" Innocently, just a 6-year-old being curious, and Jennifer immediately jumped in with, "Because sometimes your brother thinks work is more important than family?" She said it with that sharp edge to her voice, like she was trying to embarrass me in front of everyone. I took a deep breath and said, "Because I had to work, Jennifer. That's how I pay rent and buy groceries. That's not a choice. It's a responsibility." My dad put down his fork and said, "We've all made sacrifices for family. You could have done the same." That was the spark that lit the fire. I said, "It wasn't a doctor's appointment. It was a salon appointment. You wanted me to risk my job so you could get your hair done. That's not the same as an emergency." Jennifer turned red and snapped, "So now you're judging how I spend my time? I'm a mom. I don't get to take care of myself often." That appointment mattered. Grandma Linda tried to calm things down, but by then everyone was talking over each other. Uncle Brian raised his voice and said, "Jennifer, he told you he couldn't do it. That should have been the end of it. You can't demand someone give up their paycheck so you don't have to reschedule." My dad turned on Brian, saying, "Easy for you to say when you don't help out either," Brian shot back. "Because I learned the hard way not to get sucked into raising other people's kids when it isn't my job." It was chaos. Logan and Emma looked confused. Grandma looked upset, and I just sat there feeling my blood pressure skyrocket. I ended up leaving early. Before I walked out, I told my dad, "I'm not going to argue about this every week. I love Logan and Emma, but I'm not their parent. Stop expecting me to be." Since then, the fallout has been weird. My dad hasn't called me once in almost 3 weeks. Jennifer unfollowed me on Facebook and apparently told mutual family friends that I'm selfish and only care about myself. Grandma called me twice, once to scold me for causing a scene at dinner, and once to ask if I could just apologize to smooth things over. I told her I wasn't apologizing for having to work. Meanwhile, Uncle Brian has become my unexpected ally. He texted me after dinner saying, "Stand your ground. They'll either learn or they'll lean harder. But you're right." He even told me a story I'd never heard before. When he was in his 20s, he missed a shift at his mechanic shop to babysit my dad when they were kids. His boss docked him pay, and he ended up short on rent that month. He said that was when he decided never to let family guilt him into sacrificing his own stability again. It's wild because I always saw Brian as kind of the black sheep of the family, but now he's the only one who really gets it. The part that stings the most is the distance with Logan and Emma. I went to drop off a birthday present for Logan last week, just a new video game he'd been wanting, and Jennifer barely opened the door. She said, "He doesn't need gifts from someone who can't even be there when it counts." She wouldn't even let me inside. I ended up giving the gift to Logan through the cracked doorway while Jennifer stood there glaring at me. Logan hugged me quick and whispered, "I miss you," before she ushered him back inside. That wrecked me. I don't want to punish the kids, They're innocent in all of this. But Jennifer is using them like pawns, trying to make me feel guilty by limiting my time with them. I've been venting to my mom, Sharon, and she's been surprisingly supportive. She and my dad divorced for a reason. She always said he had a way of expecting people to bend around him instead of meeting them halfway. She told me, "You don't owe them your job, your money, or your time. Help when you can. But don't set yourself on fire to keep them warm." Hearing that made me feel a little less crazy. But it doesn't make it easier when I get side-eyed by half my relatives. At this point, I've decided I'm not going to any more family dinners for a while. I'll still drop off gifts for the kids, maybe find ways to see them without Jennifer around. But I'm not walking into another ambush where I get painted as the selfish one for not being their free babysitter. And honestly, I've started to wonder if this is a bigger pattern with my dad. He's been putting Jennifer's needs above mine since they got together. It's not new. What's new is that I'm finally old enough to draw boundaries. And apparently, nobody likes it when the kid stops being the convenient backup plan. So yeah, that's the update. I didn't cave, but the family is fractured right now. I feel guilty about the kids but firm about my decision. And maybe that's just what adulthood is. Realizing you can love your family and still say no when they ask for too much. Final update. It's been about 6 months since my last post, and I think I can finally call this the final chapter in all of this. The first couple of months after that family dinner were rough. I was basically cut out of my dad's side of the family, no phone calls, no invites, not even a Merry Christmas text from him or Jennifer. Meanwhile, I was still catching little snippets through the grapevine. Apparently, Jennifer was telling anyone who'd listen that I abandoned the kids and don't care about family. At first, I was angry. I wanted to defend myself to every cousin, every aunt, every family friend. But I realized quickly that if someone was determined to believe Jennifer's version of things, me trying to argue wasn't going to change their minds, so I stopped explaining. I decided I wasn't going to live my life trying to convince people that I wasn't selfish just because I refused to babysit on demand. Work actually picked up during that time. I got a small promotion at my job. Nothing glamorous. But it came with a raise and a little more responsibility. Funny enough, the same week I got that promotion was the week Jennifer posted some long Facebook rant about how people who don't value family will die lonely. My coworker showed it to me and joked, "Sounds like she's subtweeting you." I laughed, but deep down it stung. The turning point came during Logan's birthday this year. He was turning 10, and I hadn't seen him or Emma in months because Jennifer wouldn't allow it. I debated skipping altogether, but then I thought about how unfair it was for him to miss out on having me there just because the adults were fighting. So I wrapped up a gift, some Lego set he'd been eyeing, and showed up at my dad's house. When Jennifer opened the door, her face dropped. She tried to block me, but Logan saw me from the living room and shouted my name. He ran over and hugged me before she could stop him. For a second, she looked ready to explode, but my dad walked in behind her, and something in his face softened. He let me come in. That night was awkward. Jennifer stayed cold, but my dad and I actually had a real conversation in the kitchen after the kids went to bed. He admitted he was upset with me, but he also said he didn't realize how much pressure Jennifer had been putting on me until he stepped back and looked at it. He said something like, "I've been so focused on keeping peace in this house that I didn't notice I was letting her push you too far." It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest I'd ever gotten from him. And honestly, I'll take it. Since then, things have slowly started to thaw. I've seen Logan and Emma a few times, mostly when my dad arranges it. Jennifer still doesn't like me, and I've accepted she probably never will. She still takes little jabs when I'm around, but I've stopped reacting. I go for the kids, not for her. One big change, though. I finally started therapy. I didn't realize how much of this situation was tangled up in old patterns from my childhood. Talking it through made me see that I'd been the responsible one in my dad's eyes since I was a kid. He leaned on me more than he should have, and now that I'm an adult, it just evolved into bigger requests, like free child care. No wonder I felt guilty for saying no. I was trained to feel responsible for keeping everything together. Therapy gave me permission to stop carrying that weight, to understand that no is not the same thing as abandonment. The last big development came a few weeks ago. My dad called me out of the blue and asked if I wanted to grab coffee. Just the two of us. During that coffee, he told me he knows things between me and Jennifer will probably never be smooth, but he doesn't want to lose me as his kid. He admitted he handled things poorly and that he should have stepped in sooner instead of letting Jennifer's resentment grow unchecked. I told him I wasn't asking for perfection. I just needed him to respect my boundaries. I said, "I'll help with the kids when I can, but I can't be the default parent. That's not my role." He nodded. And for the first time, I think he really heard me. So where are things now? I see Logan and Emma about once a month, usually taking them out to the park or to see a movie. Those moments make all the stress worth it. Jennifer, polite in front of my dad, cold otherwise. I've stopped trying to win her over. Some people just aren't going to like you, and that's fine. My dad and I aren't super close, but the wall between us has started to come down. We talk every couple of weeks now. That's progress. And me? I'm finally learning that family doesn't mean being a doormat. Loving someone and setting boundaries aren't opposites. They're necessary for each other. This whole ordeal taught me something I don't think I would have learned otherwise. You can care deeply about people, even kids you love like they're your own, without sacrificing your own stability, dignity, or livelihood. Saying no isn't cruelty. Sometimes it's the only way to keep relationships alive. So yeah, this is the last update. The storm didn't destroy my family, but it did change it. And maybe that's for the best. Stories number 2. My life flipped upside down when I opened the wrong drawer. I'm 31. My husband Mark is 38. And we've been married almost 8 years. On the surface, we've had what most people would consider a good marriage. We met at a friend's barbecue in Denver, hit it off over cheap beer and classic rock, and we moved in together within a year. He was steady, funny, and always had a way of making me feel safe. For most of our marriage, I honestly thought we were the kind of couple people pointed to and said, "That's solid, that's love." We did the house thing, the dog thing, Sunday brunches, family trips to Arizona to visit my parents. There were fights, sure, but nothing that felt bigger than the average couple's problems. If anything, I thought we were in a comfortable phase of marriage, where you stop worrying about whether they're going to leave and just build a life. That illusion shattered 3 weeks ago. It was such a stupid, ordinary moment. Mark had asked me to grab some batteries from the junk drawer in his nightstand because the remote in the living room died. I pulled the drawer open and started shuffling around. Receipts, random pens, one of those old Motorola chargers we never threw away. Underneath some folded papers, I found an orange prescription bottle. At first I didn't think much of it. Mark has had back issues for years, so I assumed it was muscle relaxers or something like that, but the label made my stomach drop. It said emtricitabine, tenofovir disoproxil fumarate, and I recognized it because my friend Jenna from college had been on it when she was diagnosed HIV positive. I froze, staring at the label. My brain started firing a million questions at once. My hands started shaking, and of course, because I'm me, I pulled out everything else in that drawer. There were multiple pill bottles. One said dolutegravir, another was valacyclovir, and then, folded up carefully in a pharmacy bag, were instructions for treating HIV and genital herpes. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the room was shrinking around me. I remember stumbling into the living room, clutching those bottles, and Mark's face when he saw me. Pure panic. I asked him what the hell this was. He didn't answer at first, just put his hands over his face. I started shouting. I don't even remember what exactly, but it was a mix of, "Are you sick?" and "Why didn't you tell me?" and "How long have you known?" He finally admitted, in the smallest voice I've ever heard from him, "I'm HIV positive, I swear." My knees buckled. I dropped onto the couch, still holding the bottles, and just stared at him like he was a stranger. He said he was diagnosed about 2 years ago, 2 years, and he didn't tell me. He just quietly filled prescriptions, took the meds, and kept it hidden from me in his nightstand. The betrayal hit me in waves. First, it was fear. What does this mean for my health? Am I infected? Second, it was anger. How dare he not tell me something this life-altering? Third, it was heartbreak. How long has he been lying to me? When I demanded to know how he got it, he said it wasn't from me, obviously, but he refused to give me details. That was the part that made me snap. I screamed, "You've been cheating on me, haven't you?" He wouldn't look at me. I asked straight up, was it men? Women? Both? He still wouldn't answer. Just sat there with tears in his eyes, saying he didn't want me to hate him more than I already did. The silence said everything. I left that night and stayed at my friend Natalie's apartment. The next day, I went straight to my doctor. They ran every test under the sun. Waiting for those results was the longest week of my life. I barely ate, barely slept. Every second was just what if. What if? What if? When the results finally came in, the nurse told me I was HIV negative. I broke down sobbing right there in the clinic. Relief like I've never felt. But then came the follow-up conversation. I'd need to keep getting tested regularly. Since there's still a window period for some infections, I'd need to consider PrEP, a preventative medication. And I also tested positive for chlamydia, which means Mark has been reckless enough to not even protect himself. Or me. That was the nail in the coffin. I confronted him again a week later. I told him my results. I told him I knew he had been cheating. And I told him I was done. He begged me not to leave, swore he would never hurt me again, cried harder than I've ever seen him cry. He said he was scared, ashamed, that he didn't tell me because he didn't want to lose me, but what's left of a marriage after that? He didn't just lie. He gambled with my health, my future, my trust. I moved out 2 weeks ago. I'm staying with Natalie until I figure out what's next. Divorce papers are in progress. My parents are devastated but supportive. My mom wanted to drive up from Arizona the second she heard, but I told her I need space to process. Some nights I still cry myself to sleep. I still look at pictures of our vacations, our goofy selfies with the dog, and wonder how it all fell apart. But then I remember that drawer, those bottles, the way he couldn't even look me in the eye when I asked if he'd cheated. I don't know if I'll ever get all the answers. I don't know if I'll ever understand what drove him to lie to me for years. But I do know this. I deserve honesty, and I deserve safety. And I wasn't getting either with Mark. So here I am, 31, starting over, terrified, heartbroken, but alive. Update. It's been about 2 months since I made that post, and I can't even explain how much has shifted. Some days it feels like my whole life was bulldozed overnight, and other days I feel weirdly lighter, like I was carrying a weight for years without realizing it. The divorce process is officially moving forward. I filed in early September. Colorado has a 90-day mandatory waiting period, so we're in that limbo stage where lawyers trade paperwork and bills rack up. Mark hasn't contested anything yet, but he did ask his lawyer to try and negotiate amicable terms. I laughed when I saw that word. What's amicable about hiding HIV prescriptions from your wife for 2 years? The hardest part hasn't even been the legal stuff. It's the family fallout. Mark's mom, Linda, called me the week after I moved out. She cried on the phone and begged me not to ruin Mark's life by divorcing him. She said he made a mistake, but that I should stand by him. In sickness and in health, I lost it. I told her he didn't just make a mistake. He lied, cheated, and put me at risk. She got really quiet and then said, "Well, he didn't mean for it to happen." I hung up on her. My parents, thankfully, have been incredible. My dad, who normally avoids emotional conversations, actually sat me down during their visit and told me he was proud of me for leaving. He said, "Sometimes love means protecting yourself, not just forgiving the other person." That sentence has been playing on a loop in my head ever since. As for Mark, he's still trying to contact me the first week after I moved out. He bombarded me with texts, emails, voicemails, long paragraphs about how sorry he is, how he was scared, how he never stopped loving me. He even showed up at Natalie's place one night, banging on the door. Natalie threatened to call the cops if he didn't leave. And that was the last time he tried showing up in person. The texts, though, they're constant. He'll swing from begging, "Please, I'll do anything to fix this, to guilt tripping. I'm sick. I need someone. I don't want to die alone. Sometimes he tries to shift blame. He actually had the nerve to write, "If you'd been more affectionate, maybe I wouldn't have looked elsewhere." That one made my blood boil. My lawyer advised me to keep everything documented, and we're adding a no-contact clause to the divorce filings. If he keeps harassing me after that, I'll pursue a restraining order, health-wise. I've had 2 follow-up tests so far, both HIV negative. I can't describe the relief every time those results come in. I've started PrEP under my doctor's advice, and I've been to counseling to deal with the trauma of all this. The therapist said something that hit me like a brick. You weren't just betrayed emotionally, you were betrayed medically. That's exactly what it feels like. Like my safety, my body was treated as disposable. Emotionally, it's a roller coaster. Some days I feel strong, empowered, almost hopeful about rebuilding my life. Other days I feel like a hollow shell, replaying every red flag I missed. Mark working late more often. Mark suddenly being more distant around year 6 of our marriage, even the times he discouraged me from going through his things. That's my private stuff. At the time I brushed it off as normal boundaries. Now it feels like every little moment was part of a bigger lie. One thing that surprised me, friends coming out of the woodwork with their own stories. After my first post, Natalie admitted her ex had cheated on her for years, too. Another friend from college DM'd me saying her husband hid a gambling addiction for a decade. It's strange, but realizing other people have lived through betrayal makes me feel less alone. I've also started to take small steps toward myself again. I chopped off 6 inches of my hair, signed up for a pottery class, started running again after years of saying I didn't have time. They're small things, but they feel like mine. Not tied to Mark, not tainted by lies. The one thing I still haven't decided on is whether I'll ever want a real closure conversation with him. Part of me craves the answers. How many people, why, when, how he rationalized it. But another part of me wonders if that conversation would just rip open the wound again without actually giving me peace. My therapist said closure is often something we build for ourselves, not something someone else gives us. I'm trying to sit with that. For now, I'm focusing on one day at a time. I've stopped checking my phone obsessively for his messages. I've started to sleep through the night again without waking up, panicked, and I can look in the mirror without feeling stupid or duped. That's progress. This isn't the life I thought I'd have at 31, but it's the one I've got. And maybe, just maybe, it's a second chance. Final update. It's been just over a year since I opened that drawer, and my whole life fell apart. Writing those words makes me feel like I'm talking about someone else's story. But it's mine. I guess enough time has passed that I can finally look back with less rawness and more clarity. The divorce is finalized, it became official 3 months ago, and I walked out of the courthouse with this surreal mix of grief and relief. Mark didn't even show up to the final hearing. His lawyer handled it. Part of me expected him to. Part of me dreaded it. In the end, his absence said everything. He didn't fight me on anything. I got the house. I actually ended up selling it. Too many ghosts. The car that was already in my name, and no spousal support either way. It was as clean a break as possible, considering how messy everything leading up to it was. Mark and I haven't spoken since last winter. After the no-contact order was added to the filings, his attempts to reach me dwindled and then stopped altogether. I heard through the grapevine, via his cousin, who still follows me on Instagram, that he's living with some guy in Aurora now. Apparently that's who he was seeing when he got diagnosed. I don't know if it's true, and honestly, I don't care anymore. That's his mess to deal with. The bigger story is me learning to live again. The first few months after separation were a blur of therapy, medical appointments, and trying not to spiral. But as the year unfolded, I started rediscovering myself. I did the pottery class I mentioned in my last update, and now I've actually got shelves full of wobbly mugs and bowls. I started running 5Ks again, and even signed up for a half marathon next spring. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with because Mark didn't really like them. Amazing how many little ways I'd shrunk myself without realizing. The health part was the scariest, but also where I got my biggest peace. I've had 3 more HIV tests, all negative. My doctor officially told me I'm clear, though I'm still on PrEP as an added safeguard. Knowing my body is healthy, knowing I survived what could have been catastrophic, feels like a second chance at life. Family dynamics have shifted too. My dad calls me more often than he ever has in my entire life. He checks in weekly now, sometimes just to talk about sports or ask how my run went. My mom, bless her, went into full fixer mode at first, sending me articles about dating after divorce, self-care, even HIV research. I had to gently tell her to slow down, but underneath it all, I know it was her way of showing she loves me. I've leaned on them more this year than I ever thought I could. As for Linda, Mark's mom, we haven't spoken since that phone call where she begged me not to ruin his life. I used to feel sad about losing that relationship, because she was like a second mom to me, but I've made peace with it. Some people will never be able to look past their child's flaws, even when it hurts others. The question people keep asking me, both online and in real life, is, will I ever date again? The short answer is yes, but not yet. The idea of trusting someone again is overwhelming, but I can feel the walls slowly coming down. For the first time in my adult life, I'm actually enjoying being alone. I don't mean lonely, I mean alone. Eating dinner by myself without feeling weird about it. Traveling solo. Even sleeping diagonally across the bed just because I can. It's freedom I didn't know I'd appreciate. Therapy has been the biggest game changer. My therapist helped me realize that I wasn't stupid for missing the signs, or weak for staying as long as I did. She said something that stuck. You loved someone the way you were supposed to. They're the one who didn't love you back the same way. That reframe took so much of the shame off my shoulders. If I could go back and talk to myself the night I found those pill bottles, I'd tell her, you're going to survive this. You're going to cry, rage, scream, doubt yourself. But you're also going to grow. You'll find parts of yourself you thought were gone. And one day, you'll sit in a coffee shop, typing an update for strangers on the internet, and realize you're not broken. You're just different now. Stronger even. Mark's choices changed the course of my life. But they don't define me. What defines me is what I did afterward. I chose myself. I chose safety. I chose truth. So this is it. My final update. Thank you to everyone who read, commented, supported, or just silently rooted for me. Reddit strangers reminded me that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting, and that I wasn't alone. And for that, I'll always be grateful. If anyone reading this ever finds themselves in a similar nightmare, you are not overreacting. You are not unlovable, and you deserve honesty. Every single time I do. And I'm finally starting to believe it. Stories number 3. My choices ruined my dream of becoming a dad. I don't even know how to start this because I've been carrying it for years. But I guess it comes down to this. I wanted to be a dad more than anything, and I destroyed that chance with my own decisions. I'm 36 now, living in Ohio, and when I look back at my 20s, I feel like I'm watching a slow-motion car crash. I grew up in a rough family. My dad walked out when I was 10, and my mom, Susan, worked 2 jobs to keep us fed. She used to say, "You'll be a better father than yours ever was." I clung to that like a prophecy. Even as a teenager, I used to imagine myself tossing a football in the yard with my son or taking my daughter to piano lessons. It wasn't about being married or having the perfect suburban home. I just wanted a family. In my early 20s, I got serious with a girl named Rachel. We met at community college, bonded over late-night study sessions and terrible cafeteria coffee. By 24, we were engaged. Rachel wanted kids too, but she wanted to wait until we were stable. I nodded and said I agreed. But inside I was already dreaming of baby names and nursery paint colors. The problem was me. I was immature, reckless and selfish. I drank too much. I blew money on stupid crap. Cars I couldn't afford. Bar tabs that left me broke. Late credit card payments that wrecked my credit. Rachel held it together for a long time, but eventually she said she couldn't marry someone who didn't know how to be an adult. She left. And even though she didn't say it outright, I knew she was thinking, how can I trust this man to raise a child if he can't even pay his rent on time? That breakup wrecked me. But instead of learning, I doubled down on my bad habits. I dated casually, drank even more, made promises I couldn't keep. By 28, I'd racked up 2 DUIs and a mountain of debt. My mom cried when she picked me up from jail after the second DUI, saying, "I raised you better than this." It wasn't until I hit 30 that I started trying to turn things around. I'd sobered up, cut ties with toxic friends, even started building a halfway decent career in HVAC. That's when I met Melissa. She was different, steady, calm, kind. She worked as a nurse and seemed to have her life figured out. We dated for 2 years, and for the first time in forever, I thought maybe I could finally have that family I'd always dreamed of. When we got serious, I told her how much I wanted kids. She didn't answer right away. Later, she admitted she was hesitant, not because she didn't like kids, she adored her nieces and nephews, but because she didn't trust me to be the kind of dad I said I wanted to be. She brought up my DUIs, my debt, even the way I sometimes snapped when I got stressed. I swore up and down that I was different now, that I was ready. But then came the moment that killed everything. We were 33 and 29. Sitting in a fertility clinic because Melissa had been struggling with irregular cycles. The doctor asked if I'd ever had any injuries or conditions that might affect my fertility. I casually mentioned a bad infection I'd ignored in my 20s, stupidly brushing it off at the time as just an STD that'll clear up. The doctor frowned and ordered tests. When the results came back, I'll never forget Melissa's face. The infection had caused permanent scarring. My sperm count was almost non-existent. The doctor explained that my chances of fathering a child naturally were slim to none. Melissa cried in the car on the way home. I tried to hold her hand, but she pulled away. A week later, she told me she couldn't see a future with me. It wasn't just the infertility. It was everything. The years of reckless choices, the trail of destruction I'd left behind. She said she couldn't help feeling like I'd squandered the life we could have had. She left, and that was it. Now I'm 36, sitting alone in a one-bedroom apartment with a dog named Max, who probably thinks he's my child. I've been sober 6 years. My credit is better. My job is stable. I even have a retirement account on paper. I've finally become the kind of man Rachel and Melissa both wanted me to be. But it doesn't matter now. Because the thing I wanted most, the chance to be a dad, is gone. Sure, I could adopt one day, maybe foster, but deep down, I know what I lost wasn't just the abstract idea of having kids. It was the chance to see myself in someone else's eyes, to be the dad I never had, to give a child the security and love that I ached for as a kid. And it's my fault. I don't blame Melissa. I don't even blame Rachel. I blame the 20-something version of me who thought life was endless, who thought consequences were for other people, who thought he could keep screwing up and still somehow stumble into the dream he wanted. Some nights I lie awake and picture a little girl with curly brown hair running into my arms, or a little boy asking me to show him how to throw a baseball. It feels so real, I swear I can hear their voices. And then I wake up, and it's just me and Max snoring at the foot of the bed. I know people will tell me it's not too late, that families come in many forms, that I can still have a meaningful life. I want to believe that, but right now, I'm still grieving the life I thought I'd have. The one I lost because of my own choices, and that grief doesn't let me go. It's been about 6 months since I posted, and honestly, I wasn't even sure I'd come back here. Writing that first post felt like ripping open an old wound. But I'll admit something. The feedback I got mattered more than I expected. A lot of you told me I wasn't hopeless, that adoption or fostering wasn't a consolation prize, but a real way to be a dad. Some of you were brutally honest about the way I'd sabotaged myself. And yeah, it stung, but it also forced me to sit down and ask, am I going to spend the rest of my life mourning what I lost, or am I going to figure out what's left? That question became my turning point. After my post, I went into a kind of spiral for a few weeks. Work, home, beer, non-alcoholic now, but still. Sleep, repeat. I wasn't drinking again, but I was wallowing. Then something weird happened. I got invited to my cousin Sarah's kid's 5th birthday party. Normally, I'd come up with some excuse to avoid it. Family gatherings remind me too much of what I don't have. But this time I went, I don't know why, but being surrounded by screaming kids, balloons and chaos did something to me. I spent the whole day letting Sarah's son climb on my shoulders, playing tag in the backyard, helping him unwrap Legos. By the end, Sarah pulled me aside and said, "You're so good with him. You'd make a great dad." I had to step outside for air because hearing that broke me and healed me at the same time. That night, I sat down and Googled foster care programs in Ohio. For the first time in years, instead of obsessing over the life I should have had, I started thinking about the life I might still build. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Fostering isn't as simple as signing a paper. I went to an orientation meeting through Franklin County Children's Services, and they laid it out brutally clear. The goal of foster care is reunification with biological families. Fostering isn't about getting a kid for yourself. It's about giving a child stability while their family tries to get their act together. Sometimes the kids go back, sometimes they don't. It's messy. It's heartbreaking. It's real. But I sat in that room with a dozen other people, some couples, some single parents. And for once, I didn't feel like the odd one out. I told my mom about it afterward. She cried, happy tears this time, and said, "I always knew you'd be a dad somehow." That meant a lot. Considering how many times she's picked me up off the floor over the years, I'm halfway through the licensing process now. It's months of background checks, home studies, classes about trauma, medical clearances. They go deep into your history, and I had to own up to all of it. My DUIs, my financial mess, even the infection that wrecked my fertility. Part of me worried they'd just laugh me out of the room, but so far they haven't. They've told me over and over, "We don't need perfect people. We need people who can show up consistently for kids who have been let down." And if there's one thing my mess of a life has taught me, it's what not to do. Melissa reached out recently too. She heard through mutual friends that I was looking into fostering. She sent a text saying, "I hope it works out for you. I think you'll be a good dad, even if it's not how you pictured it." That message gutted me, but in a bittersweet way. Maybe she's right. I'm not naive. I know this path is going to test me. I know I'll get attached to kids who might leave. I know there will be nights I'll sit up wondering if I'm enough for them. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm moving towards something instead of just sitting in the ashes of what I burned down. Maybe I'll never hear someone call me dad in the traditional sense, but maybe one day, a scared kid will feel safe in my home. Maybe one day, I'll be the steady presence I always needed when I was their age. I can't undo the choices that ruined my dream, but maybe, just maybe, I can build a new one. It's been a year since my last update, and I think this is going to be the last time I write about this. A lot has changed, and honestly, it still feels surreal to even type the words back then. I was just starting the foster care licensing process. Now I'm sitting here in a quiet house, typing this while a 6-year-old girl named Lily sleeps down the hall in her new princess blanket that we picked out together last week. Let me back up. The licensing process was brutal. Not because I had anything to hide at this point, but because it forced me to confront parts of my past I'd rather bury. Sitting across from caseworkers while they asked about my arrests, about my drinking, about my health. It was humbling. I kept waiting for them to decide I wasn't good enough, but they didn't. They kept telling me the same thing. Kids don't need perfect. They need safe and consistent. In late spring, I got the call. They had a placement. A little girl, 6 years old, removed from her home because her mom was arrested on drug charges and her dad wasn't in the picture. I don't know how to describe the feeling of standing in my doorway when the social worker walked up holding her tiny hand. She looked at me with these wide eyes, clutching a stuffed rabbit that looked like it had been through a war. My heart cracked right open. The first night she barely spoke to me. I made mac and cheese because I had no idea what kids like, and she pushed it around her plate without eating much. She asked if I was going to send her back soon. That wrecked me. No 6-year-old should have to wonder if the roof over their head is temporary. I knelt down and told her, "I don't know how long you'll be here, but while you are, This is your home. That's the thing about fostering. You can't promise forever, but you can promise right now. Over the months, we built a rhythm. Saturday mornings became pancake mornings. Every night before bed, she asks me to read the same 3 books. And if I skip a page, she calls me out. She started at a new school, and I swear I almost cried the first time she ran out of the classroom shouting, "Daddy! Daddy!" When she saw me waiting, I'm technically not her dad, but in her little world, that's what I've become. And let me tell you something. I didn't realize how much space I still had in my heart until she filled it. Her case is still ongoing, her mom is in rehab. The state says reunification is the plan, as it almost always is. Part of me aches at the thought of her leaving one day, but the other part of me knows the job isn't about me, it's about her. If her mom gets clean and stable, then Lily deserves that chance. But I won't lie. I hope, not long ago, my mom came over and saw Lily sitting on my lap while we colored. She pulled me aside later and said, "You finally got what you were meant for." She's right. I'll never be the biological dad I thought I would be. But maybe that dream dying made room for this one. Melissa and I spoke once more too. She heard through mutual friends that I was fostering, and she called. It was short, awkward, but she said, "I always knew you had it in you. I'm glad you found it." I hung up feeling lighter than I've felt in years. I don't know how long Lily will be with me. Could be months, could be forever. What I do know is that for every day she's here, she will know stability, love, and safety. She will know what it feels like to have someone show up, no matter what. And me? I may have ruined my original dream of becoming a dad with my choices, but I've been given a second chance to redefine what being a father means. It doesn't matter that we don't share blood. What matters is that when she calls out in the middle of the night, I'm the one who comes running. So no, I'll never undo what I did in my 20s. But I'm not that man anymore. I'm this man, the one who tucks a little girl in at night and whispers that she's safe, that she's loved, that she matters, and in the end, maybe that was the dream all along. Stories number 4. My marriage became a tragedy born from taking my spouse's last name. When I married my husband, Michael Anderson, I thought taking his last name would be one of those small, romantic gestures people barely notice outside of paperwork. I'd grown up as Emily Carter. The name on my diplomas, my first apartment lease, and my driver's license. Carter was simple, clean, mine. But when Michael slipped the ring on my finger and kissed me in front of family and friends, I felt like I wanted to step fully into the role of wife. I wanted to share his name and his life. No gaps, no, well, technically, so I became Emily Anderson. It felt sweet at first. I remember practicing my new signature on napkins while we were on our honeymoon in Maine. Giggling like a teenager, my family thought it was cute. Though my dad did sigh a little, he'd always been proud of the Carter name. But I brushed that off. Everyone does this. It's tradition. It's love. The trouble started within the first year. Though it didn't feel like trouble then, more like an annoyance. People in my small town started mixing me up with Michael's younger sister, Amanda Anderson. She'd gotten into some legal trouble a few years back. DUIs, shoplifting, a mess of bad boyfriends. I knew Amanda, and she wasn't evil or anything, just reckless. But with us both being Emily Anderson and Amanda Anderson, it seemed like people lumped us together in gossip circles. I'd walk into the grocery store and get weird looks. One time, a woman I didn't know muttered, "Trash," just like her sister. As I walked by, I wanted to scream that I wasn't Amanda. But correcting gossip feels like trying to catch smoke. Then the paperwork issues began. I applied for a promotion at the bank where I worked, and HR flagged my background check because Emily Anderson was tied up in court records. It took me weeks to prove it wasn't me, my boss half joked. Maybe you should have kept your maiden name. That stung more than I thought it would. But the real tragedy came years later. Michael and I had been married 8 years when he had his stroke. He was only 36. One minute, we were arguing about the electric bill. The next, he was slumped on the floor, and I was dialing 911 with shaking hands. The hospital felt like a blur of fluorescent lights, clipboards, and bad coffee. He lingered for 3 days before he passed. I don't remember much of those days except the sound of machines beeping and the moment the doctor gently told me, "I'm sorry. We did everything we could. Grief makes the world strange. You walk around in your body, but nothing feels like yours, and in that haze, the name on the paperwork started to matter in ways I couldn't have predicted. Because to the hospital, to the mortuary, to the bank, to the insurance company, I wasn't Emily Carter, the person who had loved Michael since sophomore year of college. I was Emily Anderson, and apparently there were a lot of Emily Andersons. The life insurance claim stalled because Emily Anderson had mismatched information in their system. There were debts in Amanda's name, and somehow they tangled with mine. I spent months on the phone with creditors, lawyers, insurance reps, crying, yelling, begging, half the time. I felt like I was being treated as though I were scamming my own dead husband. I had his death certificate in my hand, for God's sake, but they wanted proof I was the correct Emily Anderson. During this time, I also lost my house, not because of money at first. Michael and I had savings, but because the title, paperwork, and everything tied to his name got locked up in probate. His family fought me too. His mother, Linda, claimed that I wasn't really part of the family anymore and tried to push me out of decisions about the funeral. She said taking his name didn't make me his blood. She even whispered at the wake that Michael probably regretted me changing who I was just to play wife. I don't think I've ever felt so invisible. It was like the name I'd chosen to honor our marriage ended up erasing me instead. 6 months after he died, I was still tangled in paperwork hell. A judge finally untangled my identity from Amanda's in a formal declaration. But by then the damage was done. My credit was wrecked. The promotion at work never came through. People who had whispered about the Andersons in town now whispered about me as though grief had turned me into a scandal. The final straw was when I found out that Amanda had been using my married name in some circles, apparently telling people we were close. She'd been picked up again for shoplifting, and the local news mentioned Emily Anderson's sister-in-law. Guess who people thought they meant? One night, I sat in my empty apartment surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked because I wasn't sure where life was taking me. I pulled out my old college ID, Emily Carter. That name looked back at me like a ghost. It was the girl who fell in love with Michael in the library, who dreamed of having kids with him, who thought life would be one long stretch of steady happiness. And I realized then that my tragedy wasn't just losing Michael, it was losing myself along the way. Taking his name was supposed to mean unity, partnership. Instead, it became a shadow I could never step out from. Last month, I filed to change my name back to Carter. The judge asked me why, and I said the simplest truth I could manage without breaking down. Because I want my life back. I still love Michael. I'll always love him. But I've learned that love doesn't mean erasing yourself. If I could go back, I'd keep Carter. Not because I didn't love him, but because I needed to keep a piece of myself intact for when the unthinkable happened. So now I'm Emily Carter again. It feels strange to say it out loud after all these years, but it also feels like taking a deep breath after being underwater too long. People don't think twice about names. They're just signatures, badges, introductions. But names can shape the way the world treats you, for better or worse. And in my case, the simple choice of taking my husband's last name turned into a slow, grinding tragedy I never saw coming. If anyone reading this is debating whether to change their name, I'm not here to say, don't do it. But I will say this. Think hard about who you are, who you'll be, and what might happen if the ground shifts under you. Because sometimes, the smallest choices can alter the entire arc of your life. And sometimes, love leaves you with more than memories. It leaves you carrying a name that doesn't belong to you, and a story you never asked to tell. It's been about 9 months since I legally changed my name back to Emily Carter. Honestly, I didn't expect it to feel like more than a piece of paper, but it did. That first morning I signed documents at the courthouse. I felt like I could finally breathe without a weight pressing down on my chest. It wasn't the grief that went away. I still miss Michael every single day. But the name change felt like reclaiming the part of me I'd lost in the chaos. Life didn't magically get easier. Identity theft issues tied to Amanda Anderson kept popping up for months. Credit card disputes, calls from people I'd never met. Even a friendly visit from a police officer to verify I wasn't involved in a shoplifting incident. It was exhausting. But each time I managed to prove it wasn't me, I felt a little stronger. I was no longer Emily Anderson, lost in other people's mistakes. I was Emily Carter, and I could fight for myself again. Work has been a slow rebuild, too. After losing the promotion years ago, I finally got another chance at management. My new boss, Jessica Miller, doesn't care about the gossip or the past. She only cares about results, which is what I've always been good at. It feels strange and good to be respected professionally again, and I've thrown myself into mentoring younger employees, trying to create stability for them the way I wish I'd had growing up. Socially, it's been harder. People from Michael's side of the family still avoid me, claiming it's too painful, which is fair, I guess. My friends from college were supportive at first, but over time, the tragedy story, taking his name, the lawsuits, the gossip, started to feel like too much. I've had to make new friends slowly, people who aren't tied to that history. I started volunteering at a local library, and somehow the kids and teenagers there see me as Emily Carter, not the woman whose name was a scandal in town. It's a tiny victory, but it feels enormous to me. Romance is complicated. I've been on a couple of dates since Michael's death. I won't lie. It feels weird to imagine someone new calling me Emily Anderson in a relationship context, but using Carter now feels right. I'm introducing them to me, not a ghost of a marriage. I met a guy named Ben Wallace at a local trivia night. He's patient, funny, and doesn't mind that my life has been messy. We've gone on a handful of dates, slow and careful. I'm trying not to rush anything, because trust is fragile after losing so much of myself. Therapy has been the anchor through all of this. I didn't think I needed it initially. I thought I was handling things fine. But grief, identity loss, and rebuilding life aren't linear. My therapist, Karen, has helped me unpack all the layers. Losing Michael, losing my name, losing my place in that family. She says that grieving a name is weird but real. I didn't just change from Emily Carter to Emily Anderson. I changed roles, status, and identity. And when that changed again, my brain had to relearn who I am. One of the most cathartic experiences came a few months ago. I went to a local genealogy workshop, partly out of curiosity and partly out of desperation, to feel anchored in my own history. Sitting there, looking at old census records and marriage licenses, I realized how strong the Carter lineage is. Not as a point of pride, but as a reminder that my name isn't just letters, it's family, history, and a part of myself that can't be erased by love, loss, or mistakes. That moment gave me a sense of permanence I hadn't felt since Michael passed. I've also started writing again. Journal entries, short stories, even letters to Michael I'll never send. Some nights I imagine him reading them in heaven, smiling at the little ways I'm surviving and reclaiming myself. Others, I cry because I wish he were here to see the woman I'm becoming. But even in the grief, there's growth. I'm learning that a tragedy doesn't have to define your life forever. It can shape you, teach you, and eventually, free you. I still think about Amanda Anderson sometimes. I wonder how her life turned out. But I've learned not to let her story define mine. Taking Michael's last name was supposed to be a gesture of love, but the truth is, I lost myself in that gesture. Reclaiming Carter isn't about erasing Michael or our marriage. It's about remembering who I was, who I am, and who I still want to be. Life isn't perfect. The grief is still there, but slowly I'm building a new identity. A life that isn't haunted by a name or a tragedy. I feel lighter, safer. Like I can finally step forward without carrying someone else's history as my own. And maybe one day, that weightless feeling will be enough to let me fall in love again. Not with a name, not with a memory, but with a person who sees Emily Carter for exactly who she is. It's been over 2 years since I officially became Emily Carter again. And I think I finally understand what closure means, or at least I'm getting close. Life hasn't been easy, but it's been real. And that's something I've longed for ever since taking Michael's last name spiraled into chaos. I've rebuilt my professional life completely. I'm now a branch manager at the bank where I once struggled just to get promoted. The new team respects me, not because of my past, but because of how I handle things now. I mentor employees, some of whom are fresh out of college and clueless about adult responsibilities. And watching them grow has given me a quiet sense of fulfillment I never got from trying to live through someone else's name or legacy, romantically. That's been the most surprising and unexpected growth. Ben Wallace, the guy I met at trivia night a year ago, is now my partner. He doesn't care about the drama, the gossip, or the legal mess I had to untangle. What he cares about is me. Emily Carter, the woman who's been through hell and come out the other side. We've moved in together into a modest house, not a mansion, just a home with enough space for both of us, our dog Max, and a little garden we've been planting together. Ben makes me laugh every day, and he's patient when grief creeps up on me. I never thought I'd be able to love someone like this again. But it turns out, reclaiming my name also meant reclaiming my heart. I've even reconnected with Michael's family. Slowly and cautiously, Linda, his mother, has softened over time. I think the turning point was when I showed her that I wasn't just clinging to a name. I was honoring Michael's memory while carving out my own life. We still have our distance, but there's civility now, and even a few shared memories that don't make me want to break down in tears. Therapy has been an ongoing anchor. I've learned that grief and identity loss aren't things you get over. They're things you live with, integrate into yourself, and let inform who you become. I still write letters to Michael sometimes, usually on his birthday or our wedding anniversary. I don't send them. They're for me, a way of keeping him in my life without letting him define the present. The local genealogy work I started continues, and it's become more than a hobby. It's a connection to the past that grounds me, tracing the Carters back several generations, seeing how they weathered wars, economic crashes, and personal tragedies, makes my own story feel like a small chapter in a larger legacy. It reminds me that names matter, yes, but they don't define your entire existence. You define how you live them. The small-town gossip that once haunted me has faded into irrelevance. People still whisper about the Anderson tragedy, but I don't care anymore. I've stopped defending myself or proving I'm not Amanda Anderson. I'm Emily Carter, and that's enough. I've started a small support group for women dealing with identity changes after marriage, divorce, or loss. Some of them come because of grief, some because of empowerment, and some because of legal entanglements similar to what I faced. It's ironic. I never thought the nightmare I went through could help others. But sharing my story has become a way to transform pain into purpose. Even more surprisingly, I've begun thinking about adoption someday. The dream of motherhood I once tied to Michael's last name hasn't disappeared. It's just waiting for the right context. I'm no longer desperate or panicked about it. Instead, it feels like a plan grounded in reality, built from experience, patience, and self-awareness. Some nights, I still lie awake and remember the Emily Anderson I once was, the one who thought taking a name could unify a life, only to find it fractured everything. And then I smile quietly, because I finally met Emily Carter, the woman who survived the chaos, reclaimed her identity, built a new life, and still has hope for the future. The tragedy born from taking a spouse's last name didn't destroy me. It reshaped me. It taught me the value of self-possession, the necessity of boundaries, and the resilience of the human spirit. I can't undo the past, but I can honor it by living a life that's truly mine. And for the first time in years, that feels enough. Stories number 5. Funny how now that women are succeeding in education, the system that historically excluded women for centuries is suddenly designed for women. So this all started with a conversation I had with my cousin Tyler last Thanksgiving, and it's been eating at me ever since. I don't usually post. But the way the whole thing spiraled into this weird mix of family debate, group chats, and late-night conversations with friends has left me needing to get it out somewhere. I'm 27, female, and finishing up a master's degree. I've worked my ass off, I've held down part-time jobs, internships, the whole deal. I've also dealt with professors who underestimated me, male classmates who'd jokingly say things like, "You're only doing well because professors like girls more," and bosses who assumed I'd be too emotional for leadership roles. It hasn't been a cakewalk, but when you look at the numbers, yeah, women on average are getting more degrees than men right now, that's just fact. So back to Thanksgiving. We're at my aunt's place in Ohio, big family dinner, and we're sitting around the table after the meal. My cousin Tyler, who's 25 and didn't finish college, suddenly blurts out during dessert, "The whole education system is rigged for women now. That's why guys are falling behind. It's literally designed for you." I laughed at first because I thought he was kidding. But nope. He went on this whole rant about how boys are punished for being active in school, how classrooms reward sitting still and writing essays, which he says women are naturally better at, and how the rise of female teachers means men don't have male role models in education. And then he looked right at me and said, like, "Don't you think it's kinda unfair that women have it so easy now? You got your degree because the system is basically made for you." I had to put my fork down and take a breath because I felt my blood pressure spiking. I told him, "Tyler, do you realize women were barred from universities until just over 100 years ago? Do you realize that for centuries, education was literally designed for men, by men, and women were either outright excluded or shoved into finishing schools to learn how to sew and keep house?" He shrugged and said, "Yeah, but that's history. Now it's the opposite problem. Now it's flipped." My dad, Mark, 58, tried to jump in to change the subject, but my Aunt Linda, Tyler's mom, immediately defended him. She said boys are being left behind, and schools aren't built for their needs anymore. And that's when my mom, Karen, 56, who's a high school English teacher, nearly choked on her pie because she's literally been in the trenches teaching both boys and girls for 30-plus years. My mom calmly explained, "The classroom is not designed against boys. What's happening is that society doesn't encourage boys to read, to write, to express themselves academically. They're told sports are important, but not essays. They're told math and science are masculine, but art and literature aren't. And then when girls take those opportunities, suddenly the system is biased." Tyler rolled his eyes. "You're just saying that because you're a woman." The room went dead quiet. My mom's face was like stone. I jumped back in and said, "Tyler, women succeeding in education doesn't mean men are failing because the system is for us. It means we finally got access and we're using it. That doesn't erase the centuries of exclusion. And by the way, the men who are struggling, they're struggling because the system still assumes someone else will take care of them. Not because the classroom is painted pink, I'll be honest." I got heated. I said something like, "Funny how when men dominated education for centuries, nobody said, 'The system is designed for men,' but the second women catch up, suddenly it's unfair, isn't that convenient?" Tyler muttered something under his breath about feminist brainwashing, which my husband David, 29, did not let slide. He snapped back that it's not brainwashing to notice reality. David asked Tyler point blank, "Why do you think more women are in college right now? Do you really think it's because the system favors them? Or is it because women know they can't coast through life anymore? They need degrees to even be considered, while a lot of men still believe they'll succeed just by showing up." Tyler had no answer. The tension was thick. My grandma tried to change the subject to football, but the energy was ruined. Later that night, Linda cornered me in the kitchen and said I embarrassed Tyler. I told her, "I didn't embarrass him. He embarrassed himself by saying something ignorant in front of people who know better." She huffed and walked away. Since then, it's been this ongoing family drama. Tyler made a couple posts on Facebook about woke cousins who attack men for speaking the truth. A few of my uncles liked the posts. My mom saw it and rolled her eyes. I didn't engage online, but it stung. Outside of family, I brought it up with my friends. My friend Jessica, 28, said she's noticed the same thing at her job. Older male coworkers will complain that women get all the scholarships or get hired first, when in reality she worked twice as hard to even get into the room. My friend Chris, 30, male, admitted he used to think the same as Tyler, until he looked into the history of education and realized women entering academia in larger numbers doesn't mean men are excluded. It means the door is finally open to everyone. The most telling part? Tyler recently applied for a promotion at his job and didn't get it. He texted me saying, "Bet it went to a woman because they love diversity hires." I checked later and nope, it went to a guy named Steve. At this point, I've realized this isn't just a Tyler problem. It's a mindset a lot of men have when they're not used to competing with women in spaces they thought were theirs by default. The narrative that education is designed for women now is just another way of avoiding accountability and refusing to adapt. It's frustrating because I don't hate men. I don't want men to fail. But I'm tired of being told my success is because the system is slanted in my favor, when really all that happened is women finally got a seat at the table. So yeah, funny how when men dominated education, it was normal. Now that women are catching up and even surpassing men in some stats, suddenly the system is biased. Maybe the system was always biased, but not in the direction Tyler thinks. Update. Funny how now that women are succeeding in education, the system, that historically excluded women for centuries, is suddenly designed for women. I wasn't planning to update, but since I posted that story a while ago, a lot has happened and I feel like I need to unload it somewhere. After Thanksgiving, the tension with my cousin Tyler didn't go away. If anything, it escalated. He doubled down on his "system is rigged for women" line. His Facebook posts got more frequent, more pointed, and some were thinly veiled digs at me. Stuff like, "Crazy how some people get a free ride in college because professors like them, meanwhile guys who actually work with their hands get called losers," or "Education is just a scam for women to feel important." He didn't tag me, but the subtext was obvious. Family members started picking sides. My Aunt Linda kept defending him, saying he was just speaking his truth and that I was too sensitive. Meanwhile, my mom told him to grow up and stop embarrassing himself. Then came Christmas. I wasn't sure if we'd even go, but David convinced me to at least stop by. Big mistake. We walked in and Tyler wouldn't even say hi. He made a point of only talking to David, not me. I tried to brush it off, but later when we were all opening gifts, my grandma gave me a really sweet book on women in history. Tyler snorted and said, "Oh great, more feminist propaganda." The room went quiet again. I calmly asked, "Do you even hear yourself? You're mocking grandma's gift?" And he said, "I'm just saying, the world bends over backwards for women now, but we're told men are the problem." It's pathetic. At this point, David stepped in. He told Tyler to knock it off, and that he was being disrespectful not just to me, but to everyone in the room. Tyler blew up, saying David was simping and that I had him whipped. That's when my dad raised his voice for the first time in years. He told Tyler to either apologize or leave. Tyler didn't apologize. He stormed out. Christmas night ended with everyone kind of shell-shocked. My Aunt Linda left with him, glaring at me the whole way. Later she texted me, saying I provoked him and that real family doesn't tear each other down. I didn't even respond. Since then, Tyler has been on a mission to convince everyone that I humiliated him. He's even started posting links to articles about the boy crisis in education and tagging relatives. A few uncles jumped on board, but a lot of cousins privately told me they're embarrassed for him. One cousin, Sarah, actually messaged me saying, "Thank you for standing up to him. He's been saying stuff like this for years and no one ever pushed back." The part that really shook me, though, was when my younger cousin Ethan, he's 16, pulled me aside after Christmas and asked if Tyler was right. He said some of his friends at school complain about how girls get everything, and he didn't know what to think. We sat in the den for like an hour, talking about history, access, bias, and how success isn't a zero-sum game. He nodded and said, "That makes sense. I don't want to think like Tyler." It broke my heart but also made me hopeful. As for me, I've decided to step back from engaging with Tyler directly. I blocked him on social media. David did too. My mom says she's done arguing with Linda over it. The family group chat is awkward, but I'd rather have distance than constant fighting. The sad part is, Tyler isn't a bad person at his core. He's funny when he's not ranting, and when we were kids, we got along. But now he's so bitter and convinced he's a victim that he can't even see how toxic he's become. It's like he's swallowed every red pill podcast whole. So yeah, the family drama has spilled into multiple holidays now, and it doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon. But if there's a silver lining, it's that I realized I don't have to tolerate ignorance just because it's family. And if me speaking up made even one younger cousin, like Ethan, think differently, it was worth the blowback. Final update. Funny how now that women are succeeding in education, the system, that historically excluded women for centuries, is suddenly designed for women. It's been almost a year since the original Thanksgiving argument that kicked all this off, and I didn't think I'd be back with an update. But the way things unfolded really drove home how much one toxic belief can spiral when it isn't challenged. After Christmas, Tyler and I basically went no contact. He was still posting things online, but I stopped reading them. My Aunt Linda, however, didn't stop bringing it up in family circles. She painted me as the instigator and said Tyler was just expressing concerns about men being left behind every time. My mom would shoot back that Tyler wasn't expressing concerns. He was parroting talking points designed to stir resentment. It turned into this cold war in the family where you knew if Linda was in the room, the topic was going to bubble up eventually. Then in March, something happened that shifted the whole dynamic. Tyler lost his job. At first, he blamed the company, saying they only promoted women and he never stood a chance. But word trickled out through another cousin that it wasn't that simple. He'd been warned multiple times about his attitude. Apparently, he'd gotten into it with a female supervisor and made a comment along the lines of course you're in charge. The whole system is rigged for women." HR got involved. That was strike three. Suddenly, his rants online started to sound less like family debates and more like bitterness bleeding into his actual life. He doubled down even harder. He posted daily about how society was collapsing, how guys like him couldn't catch a break, and how women were taking over everything. He even shared one of those men's rights podcasts that's basically just someone yelling about feminism. At Easter, he didn't show up. Linda came alone and spent the whole meal sighing dramatically. She said Tyler wasn't in a good place and that he felt attacked by everyone. My grandma finally spoke up, and she never gets involved in drama. She said very calmly, "He needs to stop blaming women for his choices. We all love him, but he's drowning himself with this thinking." The table went silent. Linda looked like she'd been slapped, but no one disagreed. Meanwhile, I've been watching my younger cousin Ethan, the 16-year-old who asked me questions after Christmas, grow into his own. He texted me after getting an A on a history paper and said, "You were right. The teacher even said women didn't have access to college until like the late 1800s. Tyler just makes stuff up." It made me tear up. Because here's this kid at the age where toxic ideas could really take hold, and instead he's starting to push back against them. That, to me, was the small victory in all of this. As for Tyler, the last I heard, he picked up a job at a warehouse through a friend. He's still bitter, still blaming the system, but the family has started to disengage. Even Linda, who used to defend him no matter what, admitted to my mom that she's tired of fighting his battles. I think she's realizing she can't shield him from the consequences of his mindset forever. And me? I've learned a lot through this whole mess. I used to think the best way to keep peace was to stay quiet, to not challenge family members when they said ignorant things. But watching Tyler spiral made me realize silence doesn't help. It just lets harmful ideas fester unchecked. The fact that Ethan reached out, that my grandma finally put her foot down, that even some cousins admitted they'd been thinking differently since the Thanksgiving fight. It showed me that speaking up matters. Even if it makes holidays awkward, do I think Tyler will change? Honestly, no. At least not anytime soon. He's dug in deep. But I've stopped taking responsibility for that. His bitterness isn't mine to carry. The funny and sad part is, Tyler keeps saying the education system is designed for women, but the only thing working against him has been his own refusal to adapt, to grow, to stop blaming half the population for his struggles. He could succeed if he wanted to. He just doesn't want to accept that it would take accountability. So yeah, that's where we're at. I've moved on, and I'm focusing on finishing my degree, building my career, and making sure the next generation in our family, kids like Ethan, see through the nonsense before it calcifies. Because if there's one thing this whole saga proved, it's that progress isn't just about women getting access to education. It's about challenging the myths that pop up whenever equality starts to feel uncomfortable for the people who were used to being on top. And that's a conversation worth having, even if it ruins Thanksgiving dinner. Stories number 6. AITA for refusing to cater to relative-in-law's expense-free vacation. So I didn't think this would blow up into a family drama. But here we are. I'm 34, female, married to my husband Brian, who's 36. We live in Michigan, about 45 minutes from the Great Lakes. We've been together for 10 years, married for 7, and we've worked hard to get to where we are. We don't live lavishly, but we budget, save, and plan out our vacations every summer. We usually take one trip for ourselves, and then host family who want to visit since we're in a touristy spot. The problem started with Brian's cousin's wife, Melissa. She's 32 and married to his cousin Aaron. They live in Indiana. I don't know Melissa that well. We've hung out at family reunions and holiday dinners, but she's not someone I'd ever call or text on my own. She's a lot. Big personality, always talking about her aesthetic, constantly posting on Instagram about manifesting abundance, while also borrowing money from her mom. A couple months ago, Melissa texted me out of nowhere. Not Brian, me. It was this long, bubbly message like, "Hey girl, Aaron and I are planning to come up your way this summer. We were thinking mid-July would be perfect. We'll stay with you guys, of course. Can't wait." No question, no. Does this work for you? Just an announcement. I showed Brian and he sighed. He said, "Well, Aaron is my cousin. I guess we could host them for a weekend." But then I texted Melissa back asking, "How long were you thinking?" She replied, "Oh, just a little over a week. Like 9 to 10 days, don't worry, we're low maintenance." I laughed out loud. Low maintenance? This is the same woman who once refused to eat Thanksgiving dinner at Brian's aunt's house because the turkey wasn't organic. I told her, "That's a long time. We can host for maybe a long weekend, like 3 nights max. After that, you'd need to get a rental or hotel." She didn't reply right away. Then a couple hours later, she sent me a passive-aggressive essay about how families should open their doors, and we wouldn't charge you to stay with us. Note, they live in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment, so that's laughable. And, with the way the economy is, we're all just trying to make memories without spending money. I didn't answer. Fast forward a week, Melissa calls Brian directly. She laid it on thick. "Aaron misses you so much. It would mean the world to us. And you're so lucky to live where people vacation. So of course family should get to enjoy it too." Brian, bless him, actually told her, "Melissa, we can host you for a weekend. But that's our boundary. If you want a longer vacation, you'll need to book somewhere else." Melissa apparently started crying on the phone, full on. "I just thought we were closer than this. I thought family supported family." Then she went behind our backs and called Brian's mom. Linda, cue the guilt trip. Linda called Brian and said, "Why are you shutting out Aaron and Melissa? They just want a break, and you have the space. You could make it work. We don't actually have the space. We have 1 guest room. That's it. And we both work full-time jobs. I can't just host someone for 10 days straight like it's a free bed and breakfast. Plus, Brian and I had already booked our own vacation for July, one we'd been saving for since last year. When we told Melissa that, she flipped out. She accused us of being selfish, for spending money on ourselves, instead of letting them make memories. She even said, I kid you not, "What's the point of family if you won't even let us use your house?" At that point, I stopped sugarcoating. I told her, "Melissa, our house is not a hotel. You're welcome to come for 3 nights. Beyond that, you'll need to make other arrangements. End of story. She called me heartless. Aaron texted Brian later and said, "Man, you're really letting her run the show, huh?" That pissed me off. I've been painted as the villain here when really, I'm just enforcing a boundary. Brian backed me up 100%, which I appreciate. But now half the extended family is weighing in. Linda keeps saying, "It's just 10 days. You won't even notice them." LOL. I notice when someone eats through all my groceries in 3 days. Another cousin even said, "Come on, what's the harm in letting them crash? You guys don't even have kids. It's not like your life is that busy." I wanted to scream. Meanwhile, Melissa has started posting vague stuff on Facebook. Things like, "Sad when family turns their back on you," and "Not everyone understands the importance of making memories." She hasn't tagged us, but everyone knows the kicker. A friend sent me a screenshot of her posting in a local travel Facebook group asking if anyone had a spare room near the lake because our selfish family won't step up. That sealed the deal for me. I'm done. Brian and I are sticking to our guns. 3 nights. Take it or leave it. If they don't like it, they don't come. But I can't lie. The family pressure is getting to me. I keep hearing "you're selfish" and "you're breaking family ties." Part of me wonders if I should just suck it up for the sake of peace. But the bigger part of me knows that if I give in once, Melissa will walk all over me forever. So Reddit. Am I truly being an AH for refusing to cater to their expense-free vacation? Or are they just entitled as hell? So buckle up, because of course Melissa couldn't just let this go. After my original post, Brian and I stuck to our boundary. 3 nights. Max. We told Melissa and Aaron multiple times, clearly, politely, directly. We weren't budging, they didn't confirm, and we thought maybe they'd just skip it altogether. Honestly, I was relieved then. 2 weeks ago, I got a text from Melissa. "We're so excited to see you guys. We'll be there on the 9th, can't wait." No mention of leaving date. No acknowledgement of our boundary. Just an announcement. Again, Brian called Aaron right after and said, "Listen, we've already been clear. 3 nights. If you stay longer, we'll have to ask you to leave." "Don't put us in that position." Aaron laughed it off. Like, yeah, we'll figure it out. Don't stress." Which was not reassuring at all. Sure enough, on the 9th, they rolled up, car packed to the brim. Like they were moving in, they brought a cooler, a giant suitcase each, 2 inflatable paddleboards, and even a box fan. Melissa came in squealing about lake life like she was walking into a resort lobby. The first night was fine. We grilled out, went for a walk by the water. Aaron was actually chill, and Brian was happy to catch up. Melissa complained that my living room decor was a little outdated and asked if I ever thought about painting the kitchen a fun accent color, but I let it slide. Day 2. The cracks started showing. Melissa rifled through my pantry and said, "Oh, you don't buy organic?" She then announced she'd just pick up a few things at Whole Foods. Except she took my debit card off the counter without asking. I caught her at the door and said, "That's mine." She laughed and said, "Oh my God, chill, I wasn't stealing, I just didn't bring my wallet." Day 3. She invited her friend, someone who lives nearby, to come over for dinner, without asking us. I came home from work to find a stranger drinking one of my White Claws on the porch. That night, Brian and I had a private talk. We agreed we'd remind them tomorrow. 3 nights, time to pack up, morning of day 4. Brian sat down with them. "Hey guys, just a reminder, it's checkout day." He literally said, "checkout day," trying to keep it light. Melissa's face dropped. "You're serious? You're actually kicking us out? You weren't joking about that?" Aaron tried to smooth things over, saying, "Come on, we thought you meant that in theory. We didn't think you'd actually enforce it," I said. "We've been saying this for weeks. 3 nights. That's all we agreed to. You'll need to get a hotel or Airbnb if you want to stay longer." Melissa lost it. She started crying again, accusing me of humiliating her, saying she'd never felt so unwanted in her life. She said, "You don't understand. We can't afford a hotel. This was supposed to be our break," I snapped. I told her, "Melissa, Your vacation is not my responsibility. You knew the deal. Don't try to guilt us into being your free Airbnb if you can't afford a 10-day vacation. You plan a shorter one, Aaron looked pissed, but he didn't fight it. He started packing. Melissa slammed cabinet doors and muttered about me under her breath. Control freak. Heartless. Doesn't understand family. They left that afternoon. But not quietly. Melissa posted on Facebook again. This long sob story about being kicked out by family, and how some people care more about their house than their relationships. Cue another round of extended family calling us. Linda actually said, "Couldn't you just let them stay? It wouldn't have killed you." Brian finally stood up to her. He said, "Mom, this isn't about hospitality. This is about respect. They don't get to bulldoze us and treat our house like a hotel." The kicker? 2 days later, Melissa posted photos of herself and Aaron at a lakeside Airbnb, full-on, vacay vibes captions, cocktails, paddleboards, the whole thing, so they could afford it. They just didn't want to pay for it. Brian and I have decided, no more hosting them. Not even 3 nights. They burned that bridge. I won't lie. The fallout has been exhausting. I feel like the villain in half the family group chats. But I also feel like if I hadn't held my ground, they'd still be sitting in my guest room right now, eating through my pantry and inviting randoms over. So yeah, Melissa got her vacation. She just didn't get it at our expense, so this will probably be the last time I write about Melissa and Aaron. Because honestly, I'm drained. But I know a lot of people wanted to hear how things shook out long term. So here we go. After they stormed out and checked into their Airbnb, I thought maybe things would just fizzle. They got their little vacay vibes photos for Instagram, and I figured that was that. Nope. Melissa cannot let go of being told no. A week later, Linda, my MIL, called and asked if we were planning to attend a family BBQ that Melissa was hosting at her place. I said, "I don't think that's a good idea. Given how things ended," Linda said. "Oh, don't be dramatic." Melissa wants to clear the air, so, against my better judgment, Brian and I went. I made myself mentally prepare for a fake smile, a plate of potato salad, and an awkward chat. I was not prepared for Melissa to stand up in front of everyone, glass of rosé in hand, and give a little speech about how sad it is when people you thought were family don't have your back when you need them. Then she looked right at me. I laughed, like actually laughed out loud. I couldn't help it. The room got quiet and I said, "Melissa, are you really making a toast about me not letting you live rent-free in my house for 10 days? That's the hill you want to die on?" She went red and started sputtering about how I humiliated her by enforcing rules that normal family wouldn't. Aaron tried to step in, but Brian cut him off and said, "Enough. We've been more than patient. You're not entitled to our home. Stop acting like victims because we didn't bankroll your vacation." It blew up. Melissa started crying again. I swear she has a direct line between mildly inconvenienced and Niagara Falls, and Linda swooped in to comfort her while glaring at me like I had personally set the BBQ pit on fire. The rest of the family split down the middle. A couple people told me privately afterward they admired us for standing firm, but others definitely think I'm the ice queen who doesn't care about family. After that disaster, Brian and I sat down and agreed. We're done. No more Melissa drama. We're not hosting her. We're not entertaining her theatrics, and we're certainly not going to family events where she gets to play the victim while painting me as the villain. We told Linda straight up, if Melissa's there, we're not. Linda tried to guilt us with the usual family sticks together line, but Brian finally said the thing I've been dying for him to say. "Mom, Melissa is the one dividing the family, not us. She tried to take advantage of us. We said no, and now she's spinning it like she's Cinderella banished from the castle. If you keep enabling that, don't be surprised when more people check out of these gatherings." Linda hung up on him. But here's the thing. After that, 2 other family members reached out to me and admitted they were sick of Melissa. 2, apparently, she's pulled similar stunts before. Just never this blatantly. She once tried to get her sister-in-law to let her store some stuff in the garage for a week, and then showed up with half a moving truck. Another time, she borrowed her cousin's beach house for a weekend and stayed nearly 3 weeks. So we're not the first victims now? Things are tense but calmer. Melissa and Aaron haven't spoken to us directly since the BBQ, though I still catch vague Facebook posts about fake family and choosing love over materialism. Whatever. At this point, she's just giving free entertainment to anyone who knows the real story. Brian and I feel solid, honestly, stronger than before, because this whole mess forced him to draw firmer boundaries with his family. We decided that in the future, we'll host exactly who we want in our home, on our terms, and if anyone tries to guilt us, that's on them. Our house is not a free hotel. Melissa can keep crying into her rosé. I'll be over here drinking mine in peace. In my own living room, with my own rules, and 0 uninvited vacation guests. Stories number 7. My partner hasn't forgiven me for forgetting his birthday on the day my sister died. I honestly don't know where to start with this because it still feels like a nightmare. I, 28F, let's say my name's Rachel, have been with my partner, Jason, 30M, for 5 years. We live together, share bills, share a dog, and for the most part, our relationship has been solid. We've had our share of small fights like anyone else, but nothing earth-shattering. Until this, my sister, Hannah, 25F, was my best friend in the world. We weren't just siblings. We were glued at the hip. Growing up, our parents, Robert and Karen, both mid-50s, worked long hours. So Hannah and I basically raised each other. We talked almost every day, even when life got busy. On Jason's birthday this year, I got a call at 7:12 a.m. from my mom. I'll never forget the tone in her voice. She told me Hannah had been in a car accident driving home from her night shift, and she didn't make it. Just like that. 25 years old. My baby sister, gone. I don't even remember the rest of the morning in detail, just screaming. Dropping my coffee, Jason grabbing me when I fell to the floor. I called out of work, called my dad, called my brother-in-law, Hannah's husband, Mark, 27M, and then I went to my parents' house. The whole day is a blur of crying, funeral home arrangements, and the worst conversations I've ever had in my life. And here's the part I know people will judge me for. I completely forgot it was Jason's birthday. I didn't post anything on social media, didn't give him his gift, didn't even say happy birthday. It just didn't register. The day was swallowed by grief. That night, after I came home from my parents, Jason was quiet. I thought he was giving me space. Then he finally said, "You didn't even acknowledge my birthday today." I blinked at him like, was he serious? I said, "Jason, my sister died this morning. I wasn't thinking about birthdays." He got this tight look and said, "I know, and I'm sorry about Hannah, but I still feel like I don't matter to you." Even just a happy birthday would have been enough. I lost it. I said, "How can you make this about you right now? My sister just died. Do you understand what today has been for me?" He shot back that life doesn't stop for one person's grief, and that relationships are about showing up even when it's hard. We ended up sleeping in separate rooms that night. Since then, things have been rocky. The funeral happened, I've been in therapy, and I'm doing the best I can to function. But Jason has not let go of that birthday. He keeps bringing it up in arguments, like last week. We had a fight about laundry and he said, "You didn't even care enough to remember my birthday. So why should I care if your clothes get folded?" It's like this poisoned dart he throws into everything now. I've tried to explain that grief is all-consuming, that I would never intentionally forget his birthday, that I had a whole gift planned, a custom leather jacket he'd been eyeing, and it's still sitting in the closet, untouched, because I couldn't bring myself to give it to him that day. He just shakes his head and says, "Excuses. My parents think Jason is being cruel." My mom told him off at the funeral reception when he muttered something about bad timing. My dad hasn't spoken to him since, but my best friend Emily, 29F, said something that stuck with me. Jason is selfish, but some people just can't handle not being the center of attention. You have to decide if you can live with that, and I'm torn because I love Jason. He was there for me in the early hours of Hannah's death, holding me, calling my boss, making sure I ate something, but the fact that he's made this into a score he keeps against me makes me question everything. Was I really that wrong for forgetting his birthday on the worst day of my life? Or am I blind to the fact that he has a point about partners still needing acknowledgement, even in tragedy? All I know is I'm exhausted, I lost my sister, and I feel like I'm losing my relationship too. It's been about 3 months since my original post, and a lot has happened. Some good. Some heartbreaking first about Jason. Things got worse before they got better. After the funeral, he started making these subtle digs that escalated into bigger fights. For example, if I zoned out because I was overwhelmed with grief, he'd say, "Guess I'm invisible again, huh?" Just like on my birthday. If I forgot something small, like picking up his favorite snack, he'd mutter, "Figures. You don't remember the important stuff either." It was relentless, and I started feeling like I couldn't breathe in my own home. I begged him to come to grief counseling with me, thinking maybe if a professional explained how trauma hijacks your brain, he'd get it. He refused, saying, "That's your problem, not mine." So I went alone. Honestly, it saved me. My therapist, Dr. Anderson, kept repeating that what Jason was doing wasn't support. It was emotional punishment. She said grief already brings guilt, and he was piling on more, which is cruel. Meanwhile, my parents have basically written Jason off. My mom told me point blank, "I don't know how you can marry someone who cares more about a birthday cake than your sister's life." My dad hasn't spoken a word to him since the day of the funeral. It's created this huge rift because Jason feels disrespected and says I should be defending him. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago. I had a dream about Hannah that shook me. One of those vivid ones where it feels like she was really there. I woke up sobbing. Jason rolled over, looked at me and said, "Are you ever going to stop crying about her?" Because honestly, it's exhausting. Something inside me snapped. I told him, "You want to talk about exhausting? Try burying your 25-year-old sister. Try waking up every day knowing she'll never get married. Never have kids, never call me again. And on top of it, try carrying a partner who thinks his birthday party matters more than her life." We had the ugliest fight of our entire relationship. He called me self-centered, said I was milking grief for attention, and threw a glass at the sink so hard it shattered. I packed a bag that night and went to stay with my friend Emily. Since then, Jason has tried to reach out. He's texted me things like, "I overreacted, but you know birthdays are important to me, and I'll try harder if you just come home." But the more space I've had, the more I see it clearly. This isn't about one birthday. This is about him needing to be the center of the universe at all times. In contrast, my time with Emily has been healing. She cooks with me, sits with me when I cry, and reminds me that grief is messy and unpredictable. Even Mark, my late sister's husband, reached out recently and said, "Rachel, you don't owe anyone perfection while grieving. You especially don't owe it to a partner who can't handle being sidelined for a single day." I've started thinking about what Hannah would want for me. She always told me, "If a man can't stand by you when life is ugly, he doesn't deserve you when it's easy." That sentence has been looping in my brain. I haven't officially broken up with Jason yet, but I think I'm getting there. I can't build a life with someone who holds my worst day against me like a weapon. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Grief is already unbearable. I'm realizing I don't need someone who makes it worse. It's been about 6 months since I first posted, and I think I can finally close the chapter on this. The short version, Jason and I are no longer together. The longer version, well, that's what you're here for. After my last update, I stayed with Emily for a while. Jason texted and called constantly, alternating between guilt-tripping me, "You're abandoning me when I just needed you," and love-bombing me. "We can fix this. I'll plan something special for us." For a few weeks, I was tempted to go back. When you've been with someone for 5 years, it's hard to imagine life without them, even if that life is toxic. But therapy, and the people who truly love me, helped me see things clearly. My therapist asked me a simple question. If Hannah were still alive, what advice would she give you about Jason? I didn't even hesitate. She'd tell me to run, that sealed it. So I met Jason at a coffee shop, sat across from him and ended it. I told him, "This isn't about forgetting a birthday. This is about you showing me who you really are when life got hard. And I can't unsee it." He got angry, of course. He accused me of being dramatic, of letting my family poison me against him, of using Hannah's death as an excuse to leave. I just sat there quietly because honestly, the fight was gone from me. He stormed out. And that was the last time we spoke in person. A week later, he sent one final text. "Hope you're happy being alone. Don't come crawling back when you realize what you lost." I never replied. The aftermath wasn't easy. I cried a lot. I grieved Hannah, and I grieved the life I thought I'd have with Jason. Breakups, even necessary ones, still feel like deaths of their own. But slowly, it started to feel like I could breathe again. My parents were relieved. I think they'd been holding their tongues, waiting for me to reach the decision on my own. My dad hugged me and said, "I've got my daughter back." My mom, who has never been subtle, said, "Good riddance. You deserve a man, not a boy who sulks on his birthday." Emily. I don't know how I would have survived without her. She gave me her spare room without hesitation, sat through endless tears, and never once made me feel like a burden. We joke now that she's my emotional wife, Mark, my late sister's husband. And I have gotten closer too, not in a romantic way. That would feel wrong, but in a we're the only ones who know exactly what this grief feels like kind of way. We meet up once a week for coffee or a walk, and sometimes all we do is sit in silence. But it helps. As for Jason, I hear bits and pieces through mutual friends. Apparently he's dating someone new already. And from what I gather, he's spinning the story like I chose grief over love. Maybe that's how he needs to frame it to himself. I honestly don't care anymore. The biggest shift is internal. I've realized that when you go through something devastating, like losing a sibling, you see people's true colors. Some step up, some step away. And some, like Jason, show you that their love was conditional all along. I'll never get Hannah back, and that will always be the deepest cut of my life. But I know this. I honored her by walking away from someone who didn't honor me. So yeah, Jason lost a girlfriend, I lost 5 years, but what I gained was clarity and peace. And maybe that's the closest thing to a win you can get when life has already taken so much. Stories number 8. My dad's will turned out to be a bigger mess than I realized. So I'm the kind of person who puts off paperwork. Always have been. I'll procrastinate on filling out forms, taxes, leases. If it looks like a wall of text, I'll skim it and promise myself I'll go back later. Spoiler, I usually don't. And that exact personality flaw ended up screwing me over with my dad's will. My dad, Robert, passed away last year after a long health battle. He wasn't a wealthy man, but he was practical, the type to make sure things were written down and organized. Growing up, he always said, "I don't want you kids fighting over stupid stuff when I'm gone." He had 3 kids, me, my brother Daniel, and my sister Sarah. I'm the youngest. Mom, Linda, passed away years before, so it was just us kids and Dad's side of the family when he went. When Dad died, Daniel took the lead on most of the immediate logistics, funeral arrangements, closing accounts, contacting people. I was grieving, but also relieved he'd handled that stuff in advance. His will was with a local attorney, and we all sat down in this conference room one rainy afternoon to hear it read. At the time, I was so wrapped up in grief I didn't listen as carefully as I should have. I heard the broad strokes. The house was to be sold, and the proceeds divided 3 ways. The savings account was split. Personal belongings were to be chosen in order of age. Daniel first, then Sarah, then me. And there was a note about his final wishes. I nodded along, signed some paperwork, and left. I thought I had a clear picture. Fast forward 6 months. The house sold, money was divided, and most of Dad's things were either with us or donated. I kept a few sentimental items, a watch, some letters, a box of baseball cards that reminded me of our weekends together. Life moved on. Then one night I was going through the original packet the lawyer gave me, and I realized I had never actually read through the will myself. I'd just skimmed the first page back then and signed off on the summary. Out of curiosity, and maybe guilt, I decided to actually read it. And that's when I noticed something huge. There was a clause near the back, buried in what looked like boring legal language, about an investment account. It wasn't with his main bank, so it wasn't included in the stuff the lawyer had distributed initially. It said that this specific account, which was apparently in my dad's name with a small brokerage, was to go entirely to me. Not divided three ways, me. Specifically, I froze. My heart was pounding. I Googled the account and after digging realized it was real. Dad had opened it decades ago, probably before my siblings were even out of college. The balance? Almost $80,000. My dad had left me 80 grand, but I hadn't claimed it. Nobody had. Panic set in. I emailed the lawyer the next morning and asked about it. She sounded surprised and admitted she had skimmed too. She thought the account had been closed years ago. "You'll need to contact the brokerage directly," she told me. So I did. After a month of paperwork, phone calls, and being transferred between departments, I finally got confirmation. The account was active, but the deadline to claim it under Dad's estate had already passed. Unless my siblings agreed to reopen probate and validate my claim, it would be distributed equally as part of the general estate assets, which meant Daniel and Sarah already got their cut. When I told them it didn't go well, Daniel got defensive immediately, saying, "We've already split everything. This is just you trying to dig up more." Sarah was quieter, but I could tell she didn't like the idea of reopening everything either. They both said it felt unfair to change things months later, even if the will technically said I should have gotten it. Their argument was that I should have read it properly in the first place, and since I didn't, I'd missed my shot. I tried explaining that Dad had written it for a reason. He wanted me to have that money. It wasn't about greed. It was about honoring his wishes. But they kept repeating that it was too late, too messy, and reopening probate would just drag us all into more legal fees and fights. The guilt ate at me. On one hand, it was my fault for not reading carefully. On the other, it wasn't just about me. It was about Dad's intent. I wrestled with it for weeks, crying in the shower, calling friends for advice. My best friend Jessica said, "If you let this go, you'll resent them forever. That money was meant for you." But my cousin Tom said, "Is 80 grand worth losing your siblings?" Eventually, I gave up the fight. I didn't have the energy for a drawn-out legal battle, and it was clear my siblings weren't on my side. So I let it go. The money is gone, dissolved into the split they already got. Daniel put his toward paying off his car. Sarah used hers for a kitchen renovation, and I kept my small portion and tried to move on. But the bitterness lingers. It's not even about the money anymore. It's about the fact that I didn't stand up for myself when I should have, and that my siblings chose convenience over honoring Dad's words. Sometimes, when I look at his watch ticking on my nightstand, I feel like I failed him. He went out of his way to do something for me, and I let it slip away. If there's a moral to this, it's this. Read the damn will. Don't skim it. Don't assume the lawyer will catch everything. And don't trust your grief-clouded brain to remember details, because you can't undo what you miss, and sometimes the people you thought would have your back won't. It's been a few months since I first wrote about the will and the investment account I missed, and I wanted to give an update because a lot has happened since then, both good and bad. After I let the account go, I thought I'd made peace with it. I told myself that money doesn't buy back time, that I'd rather keep my relationship with my siblings than fight over something I should have caught earlier. But resentment has a way of sneaking into the cracks, even if you think you've sealed them. It started with little things. Daniel making a joke about me finally learning how to adult when I messed up a work deadline, or Sarah offhandedly bragging about her kitchen renovation. Normally, I'd let those things roll off my back. But with that account hanging in the back of my mind, every comment felt loaded, like they'd benefited from my mistake and were rubbing it in without even realizing. One night, after a few drinks, I finally snapped at Daniel. We were at a family barbecue, and he made some dig about me always being the baby of the family. I just blurted out, "Well, maybe Dad knew I'd need the help, which is why he left me that account you two happily cashed in on." The whole yard went silent. Daniel tried to laugh it off, but I could tell he was embarrassed. Sarah pulled me aside later and said I was being toxic, and that I needed to let it go for everyone's sake. That was kind of the breaking point for me. I realized I couldn't just swallow this bitterness forever. So I went back to the lawyer, not to reopen probate, but just to talk it out. She told me something I hadn't even considered. Even if the probate period had closed, there was a chance to file a separate claim if I really wanted to. It wouldn't be guaranteed, and it could take years. But it was technically possible. She also admitted she bore some responsibility for not pointing out the clause. If you wanted to push this, you could, she said. But it will be costly. In money, in stress, and in family relationships. I sat with that for a long time. In the meantime, I started therapy. My therapist, Emily, helped me realize that what I was clinging to wasn't the money itself. It was the validation. I wanted my siblings to say, "Yes, Dad meant that for you. We'll make it right." But they never would. And I had to grieve that as much as I grieved losing my dad. A weird twist happened around this time. I found a letter from Dad. I'd been cleaning out the last box of stuff from his house and found an envelope tucked inside one of his old baseball books. It was addressed to me in his messy handwriting. The letter wasn't long, but it explained why he left me that account. He said he worried about me because I was the youngest, the one who always put things off and struggled with stability. He said the money wasn't meant to be a handout but a cushion, something to give me a chance to breathe when life felt overwhelming. Reading those words broke me open all over again. I scanned the letter and sent it to Daniel and Sarah. I wasn't expecting anything, but I thought maybe seeing Dad's own words would soften them. Daniel never replied. Sarah sent back a short message. "I understand why you're upset, but this doesn't change anything. We all need to move forward." That hurt more than I expected. It was like my dad was shouting from beyond the grave, and they still refused to hear him, so where am I now? I decided not to pursue the legal fight. Part of me still thinks I should. If not for the money, then for Dad. But the reality is that fighting my siblings in court would destroy whatever's left of our relationship. And while I'm angry with them, I don't want to spend the next decade in bitter lawsuits. Instead, I've been focusing on building my own stability. I started a side hustle, picked up extra hours, and even opened my own small investment account in Dad's honor. It's nowhere near 80 grand, but it's mine. And every time I put money into it, I think of him. I won't lie. Holidays are awkward now. We all go through the motions. But there's this unspoken wall between us. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever fully forgive them, or if they'll ever see me as more than the baby brother who messed up paperwork. But I'm learning to accept that family isn't always fair, and grief doesn't make people better versions of themselves. It just exposes what was already there. If you take anything from this update, let it be this. Don't assume that just because you're family, people will automatically honor your parents' intentions. Read everything, advocate for yourself, and don't be afraid to admit you need help understanding legal stuff when you're grieving. Because mistakes like mine can haunt you long after the funeral flowers wilt. It's been almost a full year since I first posted about Dad's will and the account I missed, and I think this will be my last update because I've finally reached a kind of peace about it. The months after my last update were rough, holidays came and went, and while I still saw Daniel and Sarah, the tension was unbearable. Every conversation felt like we were walking on eggshells, pretending nothing had happened while the elephant in the room got bigger and bigger. At Christmas, Sarah gave me a gift card to a home goods store and said, "For when you finally get your life set up." Maybe she didn't mean it to sting, but it did. Daniel avoided me most of the day, hanging out with the cousins instead. I left early that night and sat in my car crying, thinking about Dad and how much he would have hated seeing us like this. Therapy helped me realize something big. I was waiting for my siblings to validate me, but they weren't going to. They'd built their narrative, that I dropped the ball, they did nothing wrong, and the money was theirs now. And once people dig in like that, you can't force them to rewrite the story. I had to let go of the hope that they'd suddenly turn around and say, "You're right, this was unfair." But then something unexpected happened in the spring. Out of nowhere, Daniel called me. At first I thought it was some kind of emergency, but he just said, "I found something of Dad's and thought you should have it." When I went over, he handed me an old pocket knife Dad used to carry. The one with the chipped bone handle? It wasn't much. But it floored me because Daniel is usually the most closed off and stubborn of the three of us. He didn't apologize. He didn't bring up the will. But I think in his own way, that was his version of extending an olive branch. Sarah, on the other hand, has doubled down. She told me flat out that she doesn't want to keep dredging up ancient history and that I need to stop living in the past. We had a blow-up about it a couple of months ago and we haven't spoken since. It hurts, because she was the sibling I used to feel closest to. But I've accepted that maybe she just isn't capable of giving me what I need emotionally right now. The biggest change, though, is that I've stopped centering this whole saga around the money. Don't get me wrong, I'd still be a lot more comfortable if I'd gotten what Dad intended me to have. But I took that letter Dad wrote me, framed it, and hung it above my desk. Every day I see his words, reminding me that he believed in me, that he wanted me to have something to fall back on. That means more than a number in an account. It's proof that I wasn't imagining things, that he did think about me, that I mattered to him in that way. I've also been working hard to build stability on my own terms. I opened my own small investment account, and I treat every deposit like a conversation with Dad. "Look, I'm doing it," I tell him in my head. I'm taking care of myself. It's slow and it's hard, but it feels good to reclaim that sense of agency for the first time in a long time. I don't feel like the baby brother everyone assumes will screw up. Will things ever be the same with my siblings? Probably not. But I've learned that closure doesn't always come from other people. It comes from deciding what you can live with. And I can live with this. I have my memories of Dad. I have his words. And I have a future that I'm building step by step. That's more valuable than 80 grand sitting in someone else's account. So that's where I'll leave this. If you're reading and you're in a similar spot, please don't do what I did. Don't assume, don't skim, don't let grief cloud you into missing important details. And if you do make mistakes, give yourself grace. Losing a parent is hard enough without carrying lifelong guilt for being human in the middle of it. For me, the money is gone, the will is settled, and the relationships are forever changed. But I finally stopped living in the shadow of what could have been and started living in what is. And that feels like the best inheritance Dad could have given me. Stories number 9. Mill showed up to my baby's baptism like it was a wedding. Weeks after my sister's funeral. I didn't think I'd ever post something like this, but the last few months have been so surreal I don't even know how else to process it. I'm Emily, 28, and I just had my first baby with my husband. Chris, who's 30, our son Jacob was born this past spring. And as anyone who's a new parent knows, the first few months are chaos in every sense. On top of the newborn exhaustion, I was also still reeling from losing my sister, Hannah. She passed away in late June after a car accident. She was only 32. It's been devastating. Hannah was not only my big sister, but my best friend. She was supposed to be Jacob's godmother. Instead of planning her role in his life, I was helping my parents pick out flowers for her funeral. So yeah, things have been heavy. We had Jacob's baptism scheduled for mid-August at the church I grew up attending. My parents, Mark and Linda, were looking forward to it. Not only because it was a bright spot after so much grief, but because baptisms are a big deal in our family. Chris's parents were invited too, of course. That's where things went off the rails. Chris's mom, Deborah, has always had a flair for the dramatic. She's the kind of woman who overdresses for everything. We're talking full sequined gowns at Christmas Eve dinner, white fur coats at brunch, rhinestone clutches at a kid's birthday party. But nothing prepared me for what she did at Jacob's baptism. The morning of the baptism, Chris and I were running on fumes. Jacob had been fussy all night, and I was still emotionally raw. My dress was simple, pale blue, modest, something comfortable I could nurse in if needed. Chris wore a suit, but nothing flashy. Everyone else was dressed appropriately for church. Then Deborah walked in. She came down the aisle like it was her wedding day. Floor-length ivory gown, veil, heels that clicked so loud the priest looked up mid-prayer, She even had a bouquet of white roses she must have brought with her. Because she set it down at the altar like some kind of offering, the entire church turned to look at her. People whispered. My aunt actually gasped out loud, and I just sat there clutching Jacob, trying not to lose it. The kicker. This was just weeks after we buried Hannah. My parents were sitting right next to me, still visibly grieving, and my MIL thought it was appropriate to literally show up in a wedding dress to a baptism. It felt so grossly attention-seeking, like she wanted all eyes on her at a moment that wasn't about her at all. Chris was mortified. He tried to get her to sit quietly in the back, but Deborah waved him off and sat in the front pew, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief like she was the grieving mother of the baby being baptized. At one point during the ceremony, she even tried to stand up and approach the baptismal font like she was part of the ritual. The priest had to gently tell her to sit down afterward. While everyone was milling around in the parish hall, Deborah acted like nothing was wrong. She told anyone who would listen that the Spirit moved her to honor Jacob like a bride on her wedding day. She told me I should be flattered she went to such lengths. I was too stunned to even reply. My mom looked like she wanted to explode, but she kept it together for my sake. Later that evening, Chris confronted his mom privately. Apparently she doubled down, saying the gown was just a formal dress and the veil was symbolic of purity. She accused us of being ungrateful for her effort. Chris told her she embarrassed him and disrespected me, but she refused to apologize. She's now spinning the story to other relatives, claiming she was being artistic and that we're being cruel to her during a time she was expressing her devotion. Meanwhile, my parents were appalled. My dad said, "That wasn't a baptism. That was a circus." My mom admitted she almost stood up and asked Deborah to leave, but she didn't want to cause a scene in church. And through all of this, I just feel robbed. I didn't get to experience Jacob's baptism with joy or peace. It's forever tangled with my grief for Hannah and this bizarre spectacle my MIL created. Some family members are saying I should just let it go, that Deborah is just like that, and no one takes her seriously anyway. But to me, it wasn't just weird, it was cruel. This was supposed to be Jacob's day, our family's moment of light after weeks of darkness. And she managed to overshadow it. Now I don't even know how to move forward. I feel like boundaries need to be set, but every time Chris and I try to talk to her about it, she cries and accuses us of cutting her out of her grandson's life. I don't want to cut her out, but I also don't want Jacob growing up thinking this kind of behavior is normal. I keep going over it in my head. The veil, the bouquet, the whispers in the church. And I can't shake the humiliation. Part of me wants to go no contact, but part of me feels guilty because Chris is close with his dad, Tom, and I don't want to hurt that relationship. I don't know. Maybe I'm just still raw from losing Hannah, and everything feels heavier right now. But I can't shake the feeling that Deborah turned a sacred family milestone into her own personal theater. It's been about 2 months since Jacob's baptism, and I've been trying to figure out how to process everything that happened with Deborah. A lot of you said to set hard boundaries, some of you said to go low contact, and a few people shared eerily similar stories about relatives making milestone events about themselves. I thought you were exaggerating, but after what unfolded, I know you weren't. The fallout started right after the baptism. For weeks, Deborah kept posting photos online, but not of Jacob, not even of me, Chris, or our families. She posted professional-looking shots of herself in that dress and veil. She captioned one of them, "A blessed day welcoming my grandson into faith. A mother's devotion never ends," which is bizarre because she's not Jacob's mother. She got dozens of likes and comments from her friends, none of whom even knew it was a baptism. They thought it was some kind of vow renewal or spiritual retreat. Chris was furious. He asked her to take the photos down, and she refused, saying, "You're censoring my joy." The bigger issue came when we had Jacob's pediatrician appointment a couple weeks later. Deborah showed up at the clinic uninvited, dressed head to toe in white again, and introduced herself to the nurse as the other mother. I didn't even know she was there until the nurse asked if I wanted her in the room. I flat out said no. Deborah pouted in the waiting area and later blew up at Chris, saying I was trying to erase her role. That phrase has become her mantra lately, that I'm erasing her role. Meanwhile, my parents have been my rock through all this. My mom pulled me aside after the appointment and said, "I know you don't want to cause a war, but you're going to have to draw the line. She's not just eccentric. She's crossing into dangerous territory." It hit me hard, because my mom is not someone who uses words like dangerous lightly. Chris has been stuck in the middle, but to his credit, he's finally seeing how unhinged this is getting. He used to brush it off with, "That's just how Mom is." But after the doctor's visit, he admitted, "I think you were right, Em. This isn't harmless anymore." He's been avoiding calls from her, which of course has only made her more dramatic. She showed up at our house twice in 1 week, pounding on the door, saying she just wanted to pray over Jacob. We didn't let her in. What made everything messier was that Tom, my father-in-law, finally called me privately. He apologized for Deborah's behavior and said he doesn't know what's gotten into her lately. He said she's always been dramatic, but the bride dress thing was new, and that she's been obsessed with symbolic rebirths ever since she retired from her job. Apparently, she's been going to some retreat group that preaches about purity ceremonies and spiritual marriages. Hearing that chilled me, because suddenly her veil and bouquet made more sense, but also made it creepier. Tom asked us not to cut him out because of her, and I reassured him we never would. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Deborah was hijacking Jacob's milestones to feed some void in herself. I told Chris I didn't want her at Jacob's first Thanksgiving or Christmas unless she toned it down. He reluctantly agreed. When we told her, she lost it, crying on the phone and accusing me of keeping a son from his mother's embrace. I honestly thought she meant Chris at first, but no, she meant Jacob. My skin crawled. Since then, things have been tense but quiet. She hasn't shown up again, but she sends long texts daily about how a child without a grandmother's light is a child deprived of God's blessing. She signs them Mommy D. I wish I were kidding. I don't know where this is heading. Part of me wants to go no contact, but part of me worries that'll only escalate her behavior. Chris says he's willing to stand firm with me, and my parents have promised they'll back us no matter what. Tom has been apologizing non-stop, and I feel bad for him because he's clearly embarrassed. All I know is Jacob deserves a childhood where his milestones aren't turned into his grandmother's pageants, and I deserve peace, especially while still grieving Hannah. It's been hard enough to find light after her death. I won't let Deborah steal what little brightness we have left. I didn't think I'd be back here again, but a lot has happened since my last post, and it feels like the right way to close the loop. Christmas was the breaking point. Chris and I had agreed Deborah wouldn't come unless she could respect boundaries. We tried to be fair. We invited Tom, but told him Deborah wasn't welcome this year. He understood and came alone. Everything was peaceful until halfway through dinner, when there was a knock at the door. Chris opened it, and there she was, standing on our porch in another white dress, this time with a wreath on her head like some kind of winter bride. She had wrapped gifts in silver paper and announced, "I've come to claim my place." It was like something out of a surreal play. My dad stood up immediately and told her to leave. My mom grabbed Jacob and went upstairs. Chris froze for a moment, then said, "Mom, you're not coming in." Deborah started crying and wailing on the porch, yelling about how I had corrupted him against her, and how Jacob was spiritually starving without his grandmother's love. The neighbors came out to look because of how loud she was. Chris finally had to shut the door, and we sat there listening to her cry and rant for a good 20 minutes before she finally drove away. I didn't cry, but my hands shook the whole time after she left. I told Chris I couldn't live like this anymore, waiting for the next scene, the next disruption, the next time she'd make everything about her. It wasn't healthy for me, for Jacob, or honestly even for Chris. To his credit, he agreed. For the first time, he said the words, "We need to cut her off." The next morning he called her and said we were going no contact until she got professional help. He told her we weren't keeping Jacob from her forever, but that her behavior had crossed into unsafe territory and we couldn't expose our son to that. She screamed, accused me of manipulating him, and hung up. We blocked her number after that. The fallout was rough. She blasted us on Facebook, painting herself as a victim, writing these long, flowery posts about being a discarded mother whose love was too strong for the world. Some of her friends reached out to me privately, and when I calmly explained what actually happened, including the dress, the veil, the doctor's visit, and the porch meltdown, a lot of them backed off. A couple even apologized, saying they had no idea. Tom, though, has been wonderful. He still sees Jacob regularly, and he's been respectful of our boundaries. He said he's tried to talk Deborah into therapy, but she refuses, insisting she's just being spiritually misunderstood, he told me, with tears in his eyes, that he's sorry Chris had to grow up with that kind of instability, and that he doesn't want our son to go through the same thing. That meant a lot. As for us, we're doing better. I've been leaning on my parents more, and they've stepped up in ways I'll never be able to thank them enough for. Chris has been more present and protective, and I can see him processing his own grief about having to go low contact with his mom. It's not easy for him, but he's putting Jacob and me first, and that's what matters. I've been in therapy since losing Hannah, and now it's also helping me process this situation with Deborah. My therapist said something that really stuck with me. You can grieve the mother-in-law you wished you had while still protecting your child from the one you do have. That hit home. I think I was holding on to hope that Deborah would magically become the loving, supportive grandmother I wanted for Jacob. But she's not, and I can't force her to be. Jacob's milestones from here on out will be about him, not about anyone's theatrics. And as sad and messy as all this has been, I feel relief knowing we've finally drawn a hard line. No more white dresses, no more hijacked ceremonies, no more crying fits on porches. Just us, building a safe and healthy life for our son. If Deborah ever chooses to get help and show she can respect boundaries, maybe one day we can revisit things, but until then, the chapter is closed. And honestly, for the first time since the baptism, I feel peace. Stories number 10. People who only use a single word to be portrayed as a question. I never thought one-word questions could drive me absolutely insane until I started working my current job. I'm 29, and I've been at this small marketing firm for a little over a year. It's a casual enough office. Startup vibes, open floor plan, people in jeans and sneakers instead of suits. But the thing about open floor plans is that you hear everything. Every sigh, every click of the keyboard, every dumb conversation. And then there's Jake. Jake is 33, sits 2 desks away from me, and has this habit of asking things in the most infuriating way possible. He doesn't ask normal questions. No, he'll just say one word, raise his voice a little, and wait for you to figure it out. Like last week, I was getting coffee in the break room, and he poked his head in and said, "Lunch?" That's it. No, do you want to go to lunch? Or, are you free for lunch? Just lunch? And then when I looked at him, confused, he just stared like I was the weird one for not immediately knowing what he meant. Another time, I was at my desk typing up a client report. He leaned over the divider and said, "Draft?" I turned and asked, "What draft?" And he rolled his eyes like I should automatically know which of the 10 projects on our plate he was referring to. Turns out he wanted the second version of the spring campaign proposal, which I hadn't even touched yet, when I said I'd get to it later. He muttered figures under his breath and walked off. The worst was during a team meeting when our boss, Karen, was running through deadlines. Jake just interrupted with, "Timeline?" Karen stopped mid-sentence and looked at him like he had 3 heads. "Timeline for which project, Jake?" she asked. He smirked and said, "The client one." Like, buddy, all of them are client projects. I saw 2 of my coworkers, Rachel and Mike, exchange a look across the table like, "Here we go again." At first, I thought maybe I was just being overly sensitive, but it's become this running joke in the office. Rachel does impressions of him when he's not around. She'll pop her head up over the divider and say, "Snacks?" or "Email," in this exaggerated tone, and it cracks everyone up, even Mike, who's usually quiet, chuckles, and shakes his head. I did try to talk to Jake about it once. We were both in the break room, and I casually said, "Hey, you know when you ask stuff, sometimes it's hard to tell what you mean. Maybe add a couple more words." He laughed and said, "What, like full sentences? That's too much effort." I thought he was joking, but no. He was dead serious. He actually thinks he's being efficient by cutting down his questions to one word. It wouldn't be so bad if it was just with us. But he does it with clients too. Last month, we were on a Zoom call with a big account we're trying to land. The client was walking us through their brand goals, and Jake just suddenly went, "Budget?" The client looked startled, like she wasn't sure if he was making a statement or actually asking her something. Karen had to jump in and smooth it over with, "What Jake means is, could you share the approximate budget you had in mind for this campaign?" I swear I saw her glare at him after the call ended. What gets me is that he doesn't see the problem. In his mind, he's this cool, no-nonsense communicator. He even bragged at happy hour one time, "Why waste time with extra words? People know what I mean, but they don't know what he means." Half the time we're left guessing, and the other half, we're trying not to laugh because it sounds ridiculous. The kicker happened last Friday. I was finishing up some slides when he came over and just said, "Done?" I looked at him and said, "With what?" He said, "The thing," I asked. "Which thing?" And he groaned and said, "The slides, obviously." I said, "They're not due until Monday." "Jake." He just shrugged and walked away. Later that day, Rachel texted me a meme of someone holding up a sign that just said, "Thing?" And I nearly spit out my coffee. I've started keeping a mental log of his greatest hits. Coffee? File? Client? Numbers? It's like playing a guessing game every time he opens his mouth. Part of me wants to start responding with one-word answers just to see how he likes it. Like if he says, "Lunch?" I'll just say, "Nope." Or if he says, "Draft?" I'll say, "Someday." I know it's not the biggest problem in the world, but when you spend 40 hours a week in an office with someone, the little things start to drive you crazy. And Jake's one-word questions are officially at the top of my list. The other day, Mike leaned over to me and whispered, "Bet you $5 the next word out of his mouth is report." Not even 30 seconds later, Jake walked by and said, "Report?" We both lost it. At this point, it's like bingo, if nothing else. I guess it gives us entertainment, but man, I really wish someone would tell him how ridiculous he sounds, or better yet, that he'd just listen when people do tell him. Until then, I'll be here, drowning in half-questions and confusion, trying not to lose my mind. Update. I didn't expect so many people to relate to this. I thought it was just me being cranky about an annoying coworker quirk, but apparently single-word question people are a whole breed out there. Anyway, things with Jake have somehow gotten even weirder since my first post. So last Monday, we were in a brainstorming session for a new client. Everyone was tossing out ideas, Karen was writing stuff on the whiteboard, Rachel was sketching visuals, and then Jake goes, "Concept?" He just said it, deadpan. The room got quiet because nobody knew what the hell he was asking. Karen turned and asked, "Concept for what, Jake?" He gave this little shrug like she should already know and repeated, "Concept?" This time it sounded more like he was confused that we were confused. Finally, Mike cracked and said, "Dude, you gotta give us more than one word." "We're not mind readers." A couple people laughed, but Jake didn't. He looked kind of insulted. After that meeting, Rachel came over to my desk and whispered, "Do you think he does it on purpose? Like, is it a power thing?" And honestly, I've started wondering the same. Maybe he thinks it makes him sound mysterious or efficient. Either way, it's becoming a distraction. Tuesday was the kicker. We had a client presentation, and Jake was in charge of presenting part of the market research. He pulled up the slides, cleared his throat, and said, "I swear I'm not making this up. Data?" That's how he started his presentation. Just data? Then silence. Karen had to jump in immediately with, "What Jake means is, let's walk through the latest data from our surveys." I could feel second-hand embarrassment burning through my skin. After the call, Karen pulled Jake into her office for a chat. None of us could hear exactly what she said, but when he came out, he looked sulky. Later at lunch, he muttered, "Guess I gotta talk like a robot now," and stabbed at his salad like a kid. Rachel looked at me across the table and mouthed, "Oh my God, Wednesday, I tried an experiment." Jake leaned over and said, "Email?" Instead of guessing, I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Yes." Then I went back to typing. He blinked a few times and said, "No, I mean, did you send it?" I said, "Which email?" He sighed dramatically like I was torturing him, and finally specified, "Rachel overheard and later told me." That was the highlight of my day. By Thursday, the whole office was kind of in on the joke. Mike made a bingo card with common Jake words: lunch, report, client, draft, budget, and emailed it to a few of us. We kept it hidden, but every time Jake hit one, somebody would try to stifle a laugh. At one point, Rachel snorted so loudly she had to pretend she was coughing. The thing is, I don't actually hate Jake. Outside of this one habit, he's not a terrible coworker. He does his work, he's friendly enough, and he's not malicious. But the one-word questions are so constant that it's hard to separate Jake the coworker from Jake the guessing game. Friday was when things came to a head. Karen called another meeting and specifically said at the start, "Let's all try to speak clearly so there's no confusion." I knew it was directed at Jake, though she didn't name him. Sure enough, 10 minutes in, he blurted out, "Budget?" Karen froze, then said evenly, "Jake, please use full sentences." The entire room went quiet. He turned red, mumbled, "What's the budget again?" And Karen gave him the number, after the meeting. He didn't talk to anyone for the rest of the day. "I actually felt kind of bad," Rachel said. "Don't. He needed to hear it. But still, I can tell he's stewing. When I passed him on my way out, he gave me this look like traitor, even though I hadn't said a word. So yeah, that's where things stand. The office is divided between people who find it hilarious and people who are over it. Karen's clearly running out of patience, and Jake's doubling down on being misunderstood. Personally, I'm just trying to survive the work week without snapping when I hear draft yelled across the room like a bad improv skit. If nothing else, at least we've got bingo. Final update. So a lot has happened since my last post about Jake and his one-word questions. I honestly thought it was going to fizzle out after Karen told him to use full sentences. But instead, it turned into this weird office saga that finally came to a head last week. For about a week after Karen called him out, Jake actually tried to behave. He would start sentences with, "Can you?" or "Do you?" and you could tell it took effort, like he was fighting his natural instinct to keep it at one word. It was awkward, but it was progress. The office was quieter. The bingo cards disappeared. And for a while I thought maybe this whole thing was behind us, but Jake couldn't resist. Slowly, the single word started creeping back in. First it was lunch, again then report. A few days later he slipped a client into a meeting. You could practically hear Rachel grinding her teeth. Mike muttered under his breath, "Oh, here we go again." It was like watching someone fall off the wagon. The breaking point came during a big client meeting on Zoom. Jake was supposed to present a section of our strategy. He pulled up the slide, paused dramatically, and said, no exaggeration, "Future?" Just that, no follow-up. Dead silence on the call. The client, a guy named Tom who's usually pretty easygoing, squinted and said, Future what?" Jake kind of smirked and repeated, "Future?" Like we should all know what he meant. Karen jumped in so fast you could practically see smoke coming out of her ears. She rephrased everything, smoothed it over, and the meeting limped along. But the damage was done. After the call, Karen asked Jake to stay behind. We couldn't hear everything, but her tone was sharp and clipped. 10 minutes later, Jake stormed out of her office, grabbed his backpack, and left for the day without saying a word to anyone. The rest of us just sat there in awkward silence. The next morning, an email went out from HR saying Jake had decided to move on from the company. That's the official phrasing, but we all know what it means. Karen had had enough, and Jake clearly wasn't going to change. I thought that would be the end of it. But here's the wild part. Later that week, Rachel found his LinkedIn update. He'd already posted about starting a new chapter as a freelance consultant. His tagline? Clarity through simplicity. I almost choked on my coffee. Rachel sent it to the group chat with about 12 crying, laughing emojis. Mike said, "Does that mean his proposals are just going to be one word each?" It's funny because in hindsight, I don't think Jake was trying to be lazy. I think he genuinely believed he was being efficient and minimalist, like some kind of business monk. But in a team environment, it came off as cryptic and, honestly, kind of arrogant. Communication isn't about how few words you can use. It's about making sure other people understand you. He never seemed to get that. As for the office now, things are calmer. Meetings don't feel like guessing games anymore. And Karen looks about 5 years younger without the stress. Rachel still jokes by occasionally going, "Coffee?" just to make me laugh. But the whole thing has become kind of a running legend at work. Like, remember the guy who only spoke in one-word questions? So yeah, that's the saga of Jake. He's off somewhere being minimalist, and we're all just grateful we don't have to decode concept in the middle of a client pitch anymore. Sometimes I wonder if he'll actually do well on his own, since maybe clients who buy into the whole mysterious guru thing will love it. But as far as working in a team, let's just say it's been nice to actually know what people are asking for again. Stories number 11. The attack on Tylenol is another attack on women. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I'm definitely not one of those people who spends hours connecting red string on a corkboard. But sometimes patterns hit you in the face and you can't ignore them. For me, this one started when I was sitting in my doctor's office a few months ago, complaining about the headaches I've had since I was a teenager. Migraines run in my family. My mom has them. My sister has them. And I got my first one when I was 12. I'm used to living with it, but sometimes I just want relief. So I mentioned to my doctor, Dr. Simmons, that I usually take Tylenol because ibuprofen tends to mess up my stomach. His face actually scrunched up a little and he said, "There's been some discussion recently about limiting acetaminophen use, especially for women of childbearing age." At first I thought he meant pregnancy risks, which I already knew about. But no. He went into this long explanation about studies being twisted around and lobbying groups pushing for restrictions. He even said, "It's complicated, but you might want to prepare for it being harder to get Tylenol in the future." That stuck with me. Later, I was venting about it to my friend Amanda, who's a nurse, and she got this look like she'd been waiting for someone to bring it up. She said she's been noticing a shift at her hospital too. Doctors are pushing Tylenol less, especially for women, even when it's the safest option compared to stronger painkillers, she told me. It feels like every time women finally have a tool for managing something on our own, somebody decides we can't be trusted with it. It's not just about pain relief. It's the constant message that women can't handle managing their own bodies. Amanda gave me this example. She had a patient, Emily, who came in after surgery. Emily didn't want opioids because her brother had struggled with addiction, and she just wanted Tylenol for post-op pain. But the doctor, a guy named Dr. Reynolds, kept insisting she needed a stronger intervention and wrote her a prescription for oxycodone instead. Emily was frustrated because all she wanted was Tylenol, but she couldn't even get the nurse to bring her a basic dose without a fight. That reminded me of my co-worker Jenna. She's pregnant right now and dealing with terrible back pain. She told me her OB, Dr. Harris, flat out said, "I don't feel comfortable with you taking Tylenol regularly. Just tough it out." When she asked what alternatives there were, he basically shrugged and said, "Rest in ice." Meanwhile, her husband, Brian, went to urgent care for a sore shoulder, and they gave him Tylenol, ibuprofen, and muscle relaxers without hesitation. It's not just frustrating. It feels like part of a bigger pattern. I brought it up with my mom, who lived through the Tylenol scare in the 80s when bottles were tampered with. She remembers how scary it was, but she also remembers how the solution was about safety measures like tamper-proof seals. Not banning the medication, she said, "Every woman I knew back then relied on Tylenol. It was one of the few things we had that felt safe when pregnant or breastfeeding. If they'd taken that away from us, I don't know what we would have done." The more I started connecting these conversations, the more I realized this isn't really about Tylenol, it's about control. When Amanda and I met up with our friend Lisa for drinks, she said something that stuck with me. They always frame it like they're protecting us, protecting women, protecting babies. But if you zoom out, it's just another way of saying we don't get to decide for ourselves. Lisa isn't even someone who takes a lot of meds, but she got heated about it because she saw the parallels with reproductive rights. And she's not wrong. First it's birth control restrictions, then abortion bans, and now medications that women have leaned on for decades. It's like a domino effect, each one dressed up in the language of safety and concern, but always ending in fewer choices for women. Meanwhile, nobody's talking about restricting things that men rely on. Like Viagra, I even brought this up to my friend Kyle, who's pretty reasonable about most things. And at first he pushed back. He said, "Come on, you can't compare Tylenol to reproductive rights. That's a stretch." But when I told him about Emily's surgery story and Jenna's OB refusing her pain relief, his whole expression changed. He admitted, "Okay, yeah, that's messed up. Why is it always women who have to deal with this gatekeeping?" Exactly, and I think that's what makes me so angry. It's not that Tylenol is perfect, it's not. Of course, there should be research, guidelines, and transparency. But why is the solution always restriction instead of education? Why is the assumption always that women can't be trusted to make the right choice for themselves, even with something as basic as an over-the-counter pain reliever? Last week, I had dinner with my dad, and I brought this whole rant up. He's usually pretty quiet about politics, but he surprised me by saying, "I watched your mom deal with migraines for years, and Tylenol was the only thing that made her life manageable. If somebody had told her she couldn't have it, I think she would have lost her mind." It's not right. Hearing him say that, this man who almost never comments on these issues, really drove it home for me. At the end of the day, I don't think this is just about medicine. It's about power. Every time women carve out a little autonomy, there's this backlash dressed up as concern. And every time, it chips away at our ability to just live without being second-guessed or controlled. So yeah, maybe the attack on Tylenol sounds ridiculous on the surface. But if you look closer, it's part of the same old story. Women fight for a little comfort, a little relief, a little control over their bodies. And the system finds a new way to say no. And I'm tired of it. We're all tired of it. Update. I didn't expect my original post to blow up the way it did. Honestly, I just needed to rant because I was tired of feeling like I was imagining things. But reading through the comments was eye-opening. Some people agreed with me right away. Others thought I was being dramatic. But the stories people shared in the comments and DMs made me realize this isn't just my little corner of frustration. It's bigger. A few days after posting, I ended up sharing it with Amanda, the nurse friend I mentioned. She actually laughed and said, "See? I told you it's not in your head." She had just come off a shift where another patient, this time a woman named Christine, had begged for Tylenol after a dental procedure. The attending doctor insisted she needed something stronger and dismissed her request. Christine kept repeating, "I just want Tylenol." But apparently he wouldn't budge until Amanda practically pushed it through as a nursing note. Amanda told me, "It feels like I spend more time advocating for basic over-the-counter meds than anything else." Meanwhile, Jenna, my pregnant coworker, has been following all this too. She called me after her latest OB appointment and sounded exhausted. "Doctor, Harris doubled down on the no Tylenol stance and told her he was just looking out for her baby." Jenna said she looked him dead in the eye and asked, "Are you looking out for me too? Or just the baby?" He didn't have an answer. That question stuck with me. It always feels like the woman herself disappears from the conversation as soon as pregnancy comes into play. The weirdest twist came when I mentioned this to Kyle, the friend who originally thought I was overreacting. He texted me a screenshot of an article he found where some lobbying group was pushing the FDA to reassess acetaminophen's safety for women of childbearing age. The wording was so careful, talking about precaution and public health. But when you read between the lines, it was basically, women can't be trusted to make decisions. Kyle admitted, "Okay, you were right. This feels fishy. Even my dad has gotten into it now. We had Sunday dinner at my parents' place, and he brought it up before I even sat down. He told me he asked his pharmacist friend Mark about it, and Mark said he's been told to flag Tylenol purchases for pregnant women or women who look young enough to be pregnant." I actually interrupted him and asked, "Wait, look young enough? That's not a medical guideline. That's just making assumptions." Dad nodded and said, "Exactly. That's why it makes me angry. Who decides who looks young enough?" And then there was my mom. She got really quiet during that dinner, and after a while she said, "I remember when I was pregnant with you, Tylenol was all I had some days because my back pain was so bad I couldn't sleep. If someone had told me no, I don't know how I would have gotten through it." The room went silent for a bit after that. On the work front, Rachel, another co-worker of mine, overheard me talking about all this with Jenna, and later pulled me aside. She confessed she's been rationing her Tylenol stash because she's worried it'll be harder to get soon. She said, "I know it sounds ridiculous, but I bought a few extra bottles just in case. Isn't it sad that I feel like I have to hoard Tylenol like it's toilet paper in 2020? We both laughed, but it was a bitter kind of laugh. What's been strange is how much pushback I've gotten too. I posted about this again in a smaller Facebook group I'm part of, and one of my old college friends, Derek, jumped in to tell me I was being hysterical. He actually used that word. He said, "Nobody's banning Tylenol. You're just falling for clickbait." I pointed out that if doctors are already changing their practices and patients are being denied basic relief, isn't that effectively a restriction? He just doubled down and said, "It's for safety." Amanda later rolled her eyes when I told her and said, "Whenever someone says women are hysterical, that's your sign you hit a nerve." All of this has made me realize how personal and political healthcare really is. It's not just about what's safe in a vacuum. It's about who gets to decide what's safe and whose voices count in that decision. Every single woman I've talked to about this has some version of the same story. Having to fight for the smallest shred of control over her own body. The last thing that really pushed me over the edge happened last week when I went to CVS to buy Tylenol. The pharmacist, a younger guy named Jason, casually asked, "Are you pregnant?" I froze for a second because, 1, it felt invasive, and 2, why does it matter for a box of extra-strength Tylenol? I told him no, but walked out of there feeling like I'd just been screened for something I shouldn't have to justify. So yeah, I guess this update isn't really closure, it's just more proof that this isn't paranoia. It's happening in small, quiet ways that most people don't notice until they're the ones being told no. And maybe that's the scariest part. Final update. I didn't think this whole Tylenol conversation would end up taking over my life the way it has, but here we are months later, and it feels like every corner I turn, someone's bringing it up. After my last post, things escalated in ways I couldn't have predicted. Jenna, my pregnant co-worker, had another appointment with Dr. Harris. She went in prepared this time, armed with articles, and even Amanda's professional notes about safe dosages. She told me later she sat across from him, looked him dead in the eye and said, "You don't get to make blanket decisions for me without giving me options, Doctor." Harris apparently shifted uncomfortably and muttered something about policy changes. Jenna switched OBs the next week. She's with Dr. Lewis now, a woman, and Jenna says it's like night and day. "She treats me like I'm an adult with a brain," Jenna texted me. That little victory was encouraging, but it also highlighted how much depends on luck, who your doctor is, what office you walk into, whether they decide to allow you the meds you want. It shouldn't come down to that. Meanwhile, Amanda's hospital has started putting new restrictions in place. She called me almost in tears after a shift because a patient named Nicole, who had just given birth via C-section, asked for Tylenol to manage her pain. The attending physician insisted on prescribing opioids instead, saying, "We don't recommend acetaminophen for postpartum women anymore." Nicole was furious and refused the opioids, but the doctor wouldn't back down. Amanda told me she felt helpless. "I'm a nurse. I know Tylenol is safe in that situation, but my hands are tied. On the family front, my dad is more fired up about this than I've ever seen him. At dinner a couple weeks ago, he actually brought printouts from the FDA website and slapped them on the table. See? They're already talking about reassessing risks for reproductive age women. My mom sighed and said, "Why does it always come back to controlling women's bodies?" My dad nodded and said, "I never realized how much you dealt with until now. It's even bled into my workplace. Rachel and I had a meeting with our boss, Tom, and somehow the Tylenol thing came up because Rachel joked about stockpiling it. Tom, who's usually pretty laid back, said, 'Funny you mention that. My wife's OB wouldn't let her take it during her last pregnancy either. She ended up sneaking it anyway.' We just stared at him, and then Rachel said, 'See? This is what I mean. Women are literally sneaking over-the-counter pain meds like contraband.' Tom looked uncomfortable and changed the subject. 'Online, it's been a mixed bag. When my original post gained traction, I got DMs from women all over the country telling me their stories. Being denied Tylenol after surgery, being questioned at the pharmacy, being shamed during pregnancy for asking about it. But I also got the other side. Men like Derek, my old college friend, calling me hysterical again, or strangers telling me I was spreading paranoia. One guy even messaged me to say, 'You women are never satisfied. First it's birth control. Now it's painkillers. Maybe you should just deal with discomfort like men do.' Amanda read that one over my shoulder and said, 'Men deal with discomfort by running to the ER for a paper cut.' The tipping point for me personally came when I went to Target to grab Tylenol, and the cashier asked for my ID. I was confused and asked why, and she just shrugged and said, 'It's new policy. I'm 25, not underage, not buying booze or Sudafed, but suddenly I needed to prove I was old enough to buy Tylenol?' I left the store shaking, not because I couldn't get it, but because it was so blatant. They're starting to normalize this idea that women need to be monitored and checked for access to basic relief. That night, I had dinner with Lisa and Kyle. Lisa was as fired up as ever, saying, 'This isn't about Tylenol anymore, it's a test case. If they can normalize restrictions on something as common as acetaminophen, it paves the way for bigger restrictions.' Kyle, who's been trying hard to listen, nodded slowly and said, 'I didn't believe you at first, but now I see it. It's the same playbook. Frame it as safety. Make it sound reasonable, then chip away at choice.' It hit me that Kyle finally understood, not because I argued harder, but because he watched it play out around him. He saw Jenna switch doctors. He saw Amanda's stories from the hospital. He saw me get carded for Tylenol at Target. It wasn't hypothetical anymore. So here's where I'm at now. I'm angry. But I'm also resolved. I can't control policy. I can't stop the FDA, but I can refuse to be quiet about it. Amanda's planning to write a piece for her Nursing Association newsletter. Jenna's talking about bringing it up at her prenatal class to see how many other women are hearing the same thing. I've started saving screenshots, collecting stories, and keeping a little Tylenol file, because I know one day someone will try to gaslight us all into thinking it was never really happening. Maybe that sounds extreme, but then again, I never thought I'd be questioned for buying Tylenol in the first place. And if there's one thing this whole ordeal has taught me, it's that when women start connecting the dots out loud, the people in charge get uncomfortable. They'd rather we each think it's just us, just our doctor, just our pharmacy. But when you zoom out, it's not coincidence, it's a pattern. And I'm done pretending it's anything less. Stories number 12. I refused to give my sister a Nirvana shirt for her school's Spirit Week. So I'm 26 and my younger sister is 17. We've always been close, but being almost a decade apart, our relationship has shifted a lot over the years. When she was little, I was basically a built-in babysitter. Now that she's a senior in high school, she's in that phase where everything is about proving she's grown up. And I've become the annoying older sibling who apparently doesn't get it. The whole thing started when she came into my room last week and casually asked, "Hey, do you have any band shirts?" I said, "Yeah, I've got a ton. Most of them thrifted or collected over the years." She immediately said, "Cool. Can I borrow one for Spirit Week? It's Throwback Thursday and everyone's doing old school bands." I told her I'd think about it. Later that night, She came back and specifically asked for my Nirvana shirt. Now this isn't just any shirt. It's a faded black tee with the yellow smiley face logo, one I got at an actual Nirvana tribute show in Seattle when I visited a few years ago. It's soft from wear, has little holes near the hem, and it's one of those shirts that feels like part of your skin when you put it on. It's not just merch, it's memory, I told her no right away. She looked at me like I'd just told her I was burning it. Seriously? It's just for a day, she whined. I explained it wasn't about the day. It was that she didn't really care about the band. She couldn't name more than one song if pressed. She wanted it because she thought it would look cool for school, not because she loved Nirvana. That's what rubbed me the wrong way. My best friend Matt, who's been into grunge since we were teenagers, happened to be hanging out at my place when this happened. He chuckled and said, "Gatekeeping, huh?" In that sarcastic way, I shot him a look. It's not gatekeeping to want to keep something meaningful from being used like a costume. My sister rolled her eyes and said, "Nobody cares about that. It's just a shirt." Then she stomped off to complain to Mom. Cue the family drama. Mom called me later that night and said, "Why can't you just let her borrow it? She's your sister, and it's not that deep." I tried explaining again that it's not just a shirt to me, it's sentimental. Mom didn't get it. She just said, "You're making this bigger than it is." Then my dad, who's more chill about these things, called me the next day. He said, "Look, I get that you care about the shirt, but maybe this is an opportunity to share something with your sister. You might even spark her interest in the music." He told me about when he was in high school, how his older cousin lent him a Led Zeppelin shirt, and that's how he got into classic rock, he said. Sometimes it starts with something shallow like a shirt, but it grows into something real. I could tell he was trying to be peacemaker. Still, I stuck to my guns. The day before Spirit Week, my sister texted me, "You're seriously the worst. Everyone else's siblings are letting them borrow stuff. You're selfish." I ignored it. But Matt saw the text and said, "You know she's gonna just steal it if you're not careful." That thought made me lock my closet before I went to work. Sure enough, when I got home, I caught her snooping in my room. She tried to act like she was just looking for her charger, right? So she ended up wearing some random Rolling Stone shirt she found at the mall. When I saw the pictures on her Instagram, she captioned it, "Classic rock vibes." Half her friends commented things like, "OMG, love Nirvana," even though she wasn't even wearing Nirvana. That honestly annoyed me more than if she had worn my shirt. It's like she wanted the aesthetic without knowing anything behind it. I mentioned it to my cousin Sarah at brunch over the weekend. Sarah's 30 and way more direct than I am, she said. "Honestly, good for you. If she doesn't respect your stuff, she doesn't get access to it. That's how it works," Sarah told me when she was in high school. She borrowed her older brother's Metallica hoodie without asking, and he didn't talk to her for a week. "Boundaries matter," she said. But then there's my Aunt Linda, who I bumped into at a family barbecue. She heard about the whole thing from my mom and made a big deal out of it in front of everyone. "It's just a t-shirt," she said, shaking her head. "When you're older, you'll wish you had let her have that moment." That embarrassed me, because suddenly it felt like I was being painted as the rigid older sibling who doesn't share. What complicates things is that I know my sister feels like she's always living in my shadow. I went to college out of state, built a career, and she's still trying to figure herself out. I think sometimes she wants shortcuts into the things I like so she can seem cooler by association. But that doesn't mean I have to give her something I cherish just so she can play pretend for a school week. The irony is, I would have happily given her one of my other shirts, like a Foo Fighters one, or even Pearl Jam. But she fixated on Nirvana, because she knows it's the one that matters to me. That's what stung the most, Matt later told me. "You know she's gonna grow up and cringe about this in a few years, right?" Maybe he's right. Maybe when she's in her 20s, she'll remember this fight and laugh about how she cared more about an Instagram picture than respecting her siblings' stuff. But for now, she's still giving me the cold shoulder and telling everyone I'm petty. What I keep coming back to is this. It's not about being petty. It's about respect. If I can't trust her to take care of my things or even understand why they matter to me, then why should I hand them over? So yeah, Spirit Week came and went. She wore the Stones shirt. Everyone moved on. But the tension's still there. And I'm standing by my choice, because sometimes a shirt isn't just a shirt. Update. So I didn't think I'd be back here. But apparently a Nirvana shirt can cause way more fallout than I ever expected. The week after Spirit Week, things at home were still tense. My sister barely spoke to me unless it was sarcastic jabs like, "Don't touch her precious clothes. She might disown you." I brushed it off. But it started bleeding into family gatherings. At dinner one night, she brought it up again out of nowhere, saying, "Imagine being so selfish you can't let your own sister borrow something for one day." She said it loud enough that my mom gave me the mom look. Like she expected me to smooth it over, I just said, "I'm not apologizing for setting boundaries." That killed the conversation, but the energy in the room was thick. A couple of days later, the real kicker happened. My friend Matt sent me a screenshot from Instagram. Apparently, my sister went online and ordered a cheap Nirvana knockoff shirt. The caption under her post was, "Don't need anyone's permission to rock what I want." And yeah, petty or not, I rolled my eyes so hard I almost pulled something. She clearly bought it just to spite me, because she didn't even tag it as Spirit Week, just as her new favorite band tee. When I came home that evening, she was wearing it, blasting "Smells Like Teen Spirit" from her phone. I asked her, "Do you even know any other song?" She just smirked and said, "Better brush up, 'cause I'm the real fan now." That's when I realized this wasn't about a shirt anymore. It was about her trying to prove she could do whatever she wanted, even if it meant turning my boundaries into a joke. Things escalated when our cousin Sarah, the one who backed me up originally, called her out in a group chat. Sarah basically said, "You look silly pretending to like something just because your brother wouldn't hand it over." My sister fired back with, "At least I'm not a bitter old gatekeeper." Then she added me to the thread and wrote, "Thanks for teaching me how to be selfish." I was honestly done at that point. I didn't want this to be a never-ending pissing contest. So I called my dad. He told me again to just chill. Because in his words, "You're giving this way too much oxygen." "You're both being stubborn," he admitted, though that he didn't think I was wrong, just that he knows my sister and she'll die on a hill out of pure pride. What surprised me most was my mom finally changing her tune. A couple nights ago she came into my room and said, "Okay, I get it now. She went too far. It's not about a shirt anymore. It's about her respecting your space." I don't know if she talked to my Aunt Linda and realized she had been fueling the fire, but hearing her finally validate me made me feel a little less crazy. And here's the kicker. I overheard my sister bragging to her friends on FaceTime about how she won because she got a Nirvana shirt anyway. One of her friends asked her to name an album and she said, the smiley face one?" I almost laughed out loud. Matt, being the troll that he is, said I should just buy her tickets to a Foo Fighters show and let her squirm through it so she'd have to pretend she cared for 3 hours. He's joking, mostly, but honestly that would be hilarious. The current state of things, she's still being a little icy. But it's cooling off. I'm not budging, though. The Nirvana shirt stays with me. She can keep her knockoff, play Teen Spirit on repeat, and act like she's Seattle grunge incarnate for her Instagram followers. It feels dramatic to say this, but the whole mess taught me something about family dynamics. Sometimes, standing your ground makes you look like the bad guy in the short term, but it sets the tone for how people treat you long term. I love my sister, but she's learning that big sibling stuff isn't automatically hers to use. And honestly, if that's a hill she wants to fight on, fine. I've got plenty of other shirts and memories that mean something to me, and she doesn't get to decide how much they matter. And yeah, I'm still locking my closet when I leave the house. Final update. So it's been a couple of months since the great Nirvana shirt debacle, and I figured I'd give a last update because, honestly, it's kind of funny how things played out. First off, my sister has chilled out. Finally, for a few weeks after the whole Spirit Week thing, she doubled down on her new Nirvana obsession. She kept wearing the knockoff shirt, posting vague captions like "grunge vibes only," and playing "Smells Like Teen Spirit" loud enough for me to hear through the walls. It was so performative that even my mom started rolling her eyes. The turning point came when she actually tried to join in on a conversation with my cousin Sarah and some of Sarah's friends at a family get-together. Sarah brought her boyfriend, who's a legit music nerd. He asked my sister what her favorite Nirvana track was. She froze, stuttered something about the one with the guitar solo. And he laughed, not in a mean way, but in that, "Oh, you really don't know" kind of way. I swear my sister turned beet red. Later that night, she was sulking in her room and snapped at me when I asked if she was okay. The next morning, she finally admitted, "I don't even like Nirvana that much. I just wanted the shirt because everyone thought it looked cool." I didn't rub it in. Even though every cell in my body wanted to, I just said, "Yeah, I know. And that's why I didn't want you to have mine." She gave me this sheepish look and muttered, "Whatever." But it was the first time she'd dropped the attitude since it all started. A week later, she came into my room with an actual peace offering. A thrifted Pearl Jam shirt she'd found at Goodwill for like $3. She tossed it on my bed and said, "Here, I figured you'd like this more than me pretending to like Nirvana." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was close enough. Since then, she's sort of leaned into other stuff that's more her speed. She's gotten really into Olivia Rodrigo, Lana Del Rey, and all that alt-pop vibe, which honestly suits her way more. She still keeps the fake Nirvana shirt, but now she admits it's just for the aesthetic and doesn't pretend otherwise. Every once in a while, she'll joke about how she almost ruined our sibling bond over a band she couldn't name 2 songs from. So at least she's self-aware now. My mom has completely stopped siding with her. In fact, she told me the other day, "I think she learned something from that fight." She didn't specify what, but I'm guessing it was that pushing boundaries has consequences. My dad still insists it could have been a bonding moment if I'd lent her the shirt. But then again, he also thinks cargo shorts are making a comeback. So I'm not exactly taking his cultural insights to heart. The funniest part, though, my friend Matt, yeah, the one who called me a gatekeeper, ended up being the one to really drive the lesson home. He brought over his old CD collection and gave my sister a copy of Nevermind. He said, "If you're going to wear the shirt, at least know the songs." She never even opened the case. It's still sitting on her desk, untouched. That kind of sealed it for me. She never wanted the music, just the look. Now months later, we're fine. We laugh about it sometimes, and she'll jokingly say, "Hey, can I borrow your shirt?" Before adding, "Kidding, kidding, but I'll tell you what, I still lock my closet when I leave for the weekend." Old habits die hard, so yeah, that's the final chapter. My shirt is safe. My sister learned that borrowing isn't always the same as taking, and I've got a new Pearl Jam tee out of the deal. Not a bad ending for what started as the dumbest sibling feud ever. And honestly, she might have thought it was about a t-shirt, but for me it was about drawing a line. Turns out even a faded band tee can teach you a lot about respect, family, and how far you'll go to defend something that matters to you.